Hello and welcome to the Strange New Worlds panel, season 2 of Postcards from a Dying World. We've had a transporter accident and an alternative universe version of a horror podcaster, Desmond Reddick of Dread Media, has beamed in from Canada to join my
Permission to
regular
come
bridge
aboard.
crew. Issa Diao and Sara Lynn Michener are returning, as always, to talk about the latest season of Star Trek. Sarah has been oiling up her guns and ready to go. Some of you will be surprised since she was Mrs. Positive for so long. I think she's had it and is ready to give it to season 2 of Strange New Worlds, but we're going to have various opinions. And so before we get into that, those of you who have listened to these episodes, you know Issa, you know Sarah, you know me. Des, what's your background with Star Trek so we can give people a baseline?
Wow. So I watched all of the original series with my dad when I was really little. When did TNG come out? Was that 89?
It was
86.
87.
Oh shit. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So so by the time I was 7 years old, I'd seen the entirety of the original series. And then my dad was really excited. He's like, they're doing another Star Trek. And I was like, oh, cool. So then we watched the bulk of Next Generation together. And then I skipped over to Deep Space Nine. I watched them both for a little bit, and then I just dropped Next Generation because Deep Space Nine was so cool to me. And then
And you recently did a big Star Trek rewatch or Deep Space Nine rewatch, right? Wasn't that inspired by us doing these panels?
I think so. I think it was. And then so I've always loved Deep Space Nine, so I did an entire rewatch of that. And then after that I did a rewatch of Next Generation starting at season 3. Smart. On good advice. I'm not a sadist or a masochist.
There are some good second seasons.
There is because I remembered. I'm like, I don't remember watching it. That was a season 1 or a season 2 episode. So I am going to go cherry pick a couple because just like vivid memories as a kid watching it. Yeah. And then Deep Space Nine. And I think I watched the first 2 seasons of Enterprise. And then I sort of disappeared from Trek until New Trek came around a couple years ago. And you guys started talking about it, frankly.
Yeah. Well, I remember at some point you sent me a message saying that you wanted to be able to watch along with our episodes, but you had to catch up on some things.
Right.
So
yeah.
So Des is one of my most trusted readers. When I finish a book, he's one of the people I send for comments, thoughts, and stuff. So I highly value his opinion on things and matters. So he was eventually going to be on one of these Star Trek episodes to talk Star Trek. But
happy to be here.
Yeah. And so let's go first with our general thoughts of the whole season, and then we'll go episode by episode like we usually do. I have a lot of thoughts on this season as well. I think we should start maybe with Issa this time, and then we'll go to Sarah next.
Okay, I loved it. I thought this was like, I would almost call this season perfect. The first season I felt had at least one episode that I didn't like. This one, they were all perfect, I thought. We'll get to we'll go through episode by episode. Obviously there were some things, whatever, but I want to say that for the interest of making it fun to talk about, I'm going to nitpick a bunch of stuff, but overall, I thought this was fantastic. Everyone involved in making it should get a gold star. This was great. And everyone did their job really well. And
point out
a commendation, not a gold star.
We should point out, Issa, that you did not watch week to week. You waited to watch all in the last couple days.
Exactly. I'm a binge watcher because it's not the 1990s anymore, and it's ridiculous people wait a week to watch a TV show. And quite frankly, I have too much stuff going on to remember week to week what happened in the previous episode. Like I pretty much watched season 2, not really remembering what happened in season 1, but with I picked it up on context. I don't, if you ask me questions about season 1, I wouldn't really remember it, except that I hated the fairy tale episode. That's
oh my God.
But season 2, I really enjoyed. I think there were some bright spots that are like maybe the best thing Trek's ever done. We'll talk about those, but yeah, overall I loved it, and I'm gonna nitpick a bunch of stuff. And if you didn't listen to this part and you just fast forwarded into the podcast, you might think that I'm being really harsh and tearing it apart. I just think it'd be really boring to say everything was great. I want to nitpick some stuff.
Well, my personal feeling is there was a lot of stuff that could have been easily improved by slight writing changes. However, we'll get there. Sarah, season 2 is now I know a little bit because I've seen your comments along the way on Facebook.
Yes, there's been a lot of throwing slippers at the television, and often during some of the episodes that I thought were really stupid, I had to go and get my slippers so that I had more slippers to throw at the television, because I only
had to reload.
I gotta reload. And I feel like in general, Strange New Worlds, Strange New Worlds is my least favorite of all the new Treks that has come out. And I get that it's fluffy and it's silly and it's supposed to be, and I actually love that about it. But I feel like it's kind of Star Trek for people with ADHD. Like the logic within itself is pretty much anything goes. With all of the other Treks, people sort of get very nitpicky about canon and everything else. They're like, well, this doesn't match up with what they did in 1966. And I'm like, yeah, that's intentional. Thank you. But like, it's so inconsistent within itself. And I think that's one of the things that drives me crazy. But I feel almost like, if they have a writer's team of 10, I feel like 5 of those writers are really stupid and the other 5 are really fantastic. And so there'll be one episode that I absolutely hated that I feel like is one of the worst episodes that has ever been, ever come out in any Star Trek, let alone Strange New Worlds. And then the episode directly after that will be great, fantastic, as if it was written by a completely different writing team. So it's kind of jarring, and it isn't the style. Like, I totally love and get that, they're going to have one episode that's dark followed by an episode that's a musical. Great, love that. But the consistency in the writing is all over the place. So I've never seen a more sort of, all over the place Star Trek within, the logic that is contained within itself, within each show. And I usually, with the shows, because I feel like there's a lot of room for diversity in Star Trek, I usually feel like as long as it kind of makes sense within itself, it's okay with me if there's some inconsistencies with the rest of the series. And for a franchise that's over 50 years old, that's to be expected. But yeah, this is I think the only Star Trek series that of the new ones that's just, it's so all over the place. Oh my goodness.
Sarah, did you watch it week by week?
Yeah.
Okay, because I always love hearing your opinion on these, and usually you're like convincing me to like something more. But we're playing Earth roles this time. But I think if you ever do watch it again, which it sounds like you don't want to, but if you ever do, when you watch it all at once, it actually feels very smooth and not jarring at all. I would never.
I rewatched my least favorite episode so that I could take notes, and I hated it even more. It was Charades, by the way. Charades is my least favorite episode. And I feel like Charades is right up there with Spock's brain and that episode where Beverly fucks a ghost. It was absolutely cringe-worthily terrible.
I had big problems with that episode, so we're going to agree with on that.
But I understand, like, I love Star Trek, right? So I will keep watching no matter what happens. I'll keep watching this show and hate every minute of it, because it's Star Trek. That's my whole deal. That's my jam.
So we'll get to Charades. We'll get there. We'll talk about it. Before we get to Dez's overall opinion, my overall opinion on this season was that it's weird. I rewatched it in the last couple days, the whole season, but I watched it out of order. which was very interesting because I didn't plan to rewatch it. I just rewatched. I watched. I think it was the Rigel 7 episode, and then I was like, I just watched in the middle, and then I ended up watching 1 and 2, and then I was all over the place. And I did like some of the episodes more this season, but I would not watch my least favorite episode, which was the time travel to Toronto episode, which can fuck right off. I hated that episode. That was the one that I hated. We'll get into that. But I did like the season more the second time. And but my problem with the season is that there were a lot of easy fixes that were right there. And the first one that I will use as examples in the okay, we've stolen the Enterprise like 100 times. That was really a silly plot thing. If they had just had it be that Admiral April was like, if they had a scene where April said, "I'm ordering you not to go, but you should go," and Spock's basically like, "Oh, I should go then," where like April kind of like passively tells him, "Take the Enterprise. I can't tell you to go, but go," in some way, shape, or form. Just that little change would have made it all make a little bit more sense, right? Instead of like, we're letting him get away with stealing the Enterprise, and we're stealing the Enterprise, which we've done 100 times, it seems like. So
I mean, but that's the thing, right? With Starfleet, is that's their whole jam, is their whole wink prime directive thing is, if you violate direct orders but you save the day, it's fine. They've done that like 50 times.
Yeah, I know, but still, again, like, they have done it 50 times, and that's part of the problem. Yeah. So my problem with this season was there are a couple things that were my little problem. First of all, there was not enough Pike, and I know the real world thing is his wife had a baby and he was at home a lot, and so they wrote him out of a lot of the season. There should have been more emphasis on Pike, Spock, and Una. Like, going deeper into the crew is fine, but like, a lot of my problems with this season all would have been solved if it was 22 episodes instead of 10. Because just some of the things that I didn't like, I think I wouldn't have minded so much. Like, you can do all the Ferengi episodes you want if I'm going to get 26 episodes of Deep Space Nine. And they did a high level of Ferengi episodes in this season, i.e. comedy episodes, which they will still be Ferengi episodes to me, whether there's no Ferengi involved at all.
I agree with you entirely, except I really love Ferengi episodes. So
I do not. Although Little Green Men was great. Again, every once in a while you get them right. So anyways, that's my overall take on the season, is that I didn't like it as much as season 1. I didn't think it was as solid as season 1 as far as Strange New Worlds, but it's still Star Trek. And my biggest problem with the way Star Trek in general has been doing is, I wish they would spend more time focusing on the fact that they're in space and that they're a functioning ship. And like, that's just my thing. Like, if I was writing Star Trek, they would have episodes where the fucking life support's not working and they don't have gravity and they have to deal with it. And they're just there would be realities of them being in space, and there wasn't enough of that for me in Star Trek in general, period.
But how are we going to make room for Captain Pike to cook for everybody?
Well, and they did explain that, first of all, there's like half as many people on the Enterprise in the Pike era.
Right.
They have all the more room. And apparently Kirk's going to be like, no, I got to worry about way more people. So we're going to make all the rooms smaller. And I'm going to constantly talk about how I am responsible for all these people. Because that's going to be his thing. But Des, your overall feelings on the season, and we'll go episode by episode.
Yeah, I kind of agree with everybody. I thought it was also kind of weird that one of the highlights of the season for me was Jim Kirk. I don't know the name of the actor who plays him.
Paul Wesley.
Paul Wesley. Okay, and I like him a lot, and I just think like, oh man, he's sure in this show a lot. So like I hope that means that once Pike, you know, seals his fate, maybe we'll move on to I don't know. That's just bullshit. But I think overall, that's what you asked me. Overall opinion of the season is yes, I agree with you, Dave, in that it's not as good as season 1. And I agree with Sarah in that there's a couple that I really hate. And actually, yeah, Tomorrow is one of them. Charades is another. I love weird Trek, but I don't want to. That was like a Friends episode, like it was. Don't give me bad sitcom Trek, please, ever.
Well, and they just did it last season, and they pulled it off better last season. And it's like, is
right.
every 6th episode of Strange New Worlds going to be a goofy Spock episode? Is that what we're setting up? Because
I think part of the problem is that there's a lot of goofy Spock in this season too.
Way too much.
Yeah.
Way too much.
But also, I gotta say,
I will complain about that.
With all that said, I think the highs of this season are superb. Like, there's a couple episodes where I was like, "That's some of the best Trek I've ever seen."
Yeah.
So
the Mabenga Moons of Jagal episode was up there with an Pale Moonlight.
I watched this season as it came out, and then also rewatched the entire thing in the past 2 days, but did it in order. In fact, I did 2.5 days. I watched one episode, the last episode today again, but 2 days of that, the entire season cut in half, and I think it does work better on a binge watch. I think I liked the episodes I disliked a little better on the rewatch in that span of binge watching. So there is that.
Like, if you're like, for me, for example, when a new Star Trek comes out, I call it Trek Thursday. I wake up before work, I watch it. Like, I never do this with any other show.
Right.
Mornings are my work time for books, for writing, and I sit there with a mug of tea and I get super psyched to watch Star Trek. And when you're in Toronto the whole day and you're just pissing me off, then like I have to wait a whole another week for an episode that I'm gonna like. Then that it's worse than if I immediately start another episode, and that one cleanses the palate, right?
Yeah, and again, I agree. Like, if there were 22 episodes, then I'd be happy to have a musical episode. But in this, like, musicals, you don't get any story in music. Anyway, we'll talk about that. But like, give me your worst, craziest swing, because that's another thing I like about this show. It takes wild fucking swings more than any other Trek, I think, and sometimes it connects, and sometimes it does not, and I appreciate it for that. But wow, some of the choices are a little puzzling for me.
Right. Yeah, and sidelining Pike in the very first episode, like, I did not like that. And then, there's something. Well, yeah, let's get into that episode. Let's get started on that. So the first episode was The Broken Circle, and we got some Klingon stuff. We got the stealing of the Enterprise. We got a mystery. We got the fake starship. We got Mabenga and Chapel like taking roid rage drugs.
Super soldier serum.
Yeah. Super soldier serum. Yeah, they were going Captain America and
Mabenga smash.
Yeah. So there were things I really liked. A lot of things about this episode. I liked the introduction of Pelia. I thought Ethan Peck was great in this episode as Spock. I thought that I want the ship to go thing was a little much. Like, the timing of it was a little weird, but I still laughed at that. And then the fucking starbase looked awesome. And that's like an example of where see, that's the kind of stuff that I need more of. I need more like future Federation like life,
world building.
World building outside of. That's one of the reasons why like I like Picard season 1 when a lot of people don't, is because I like that it's not Starfleet. Like, so I'm all about Picard season 1 in a weird way that most people are like not as into it as I am. But Picard season 1's high on my modern Trek ranking because I just love that it's not Starfleet.
Yeah, and I agree with you on that one. Yeah.
Yeah. And I want more Star Trek set outside of Starfleet. I want that very badly.
Mhm.
No one's listening to me, but but I want that very badly. But I do like all the scenes in the starbase. The fight scene was a little over the top, and when you watch the whole season, you understand that they're setting up
Yeah.
Mabenga for later.
I was critical of that on first watch. I'm like, all of a sudden the doctor and the nurse are fucking like Krav Maga experts. Like, and this guy was on the fucking night shift for Kirk the entire time.
Well,
like, this guy should go on every journey.
I think they're setting that up. I think the events of what he did in the Klingon War is going to come back to haunt him. And my prediction is that Mabenga is going to end up in prison at the end of this series, and him coming back to the second shift of the Enterprise is a favor.
Right.
After he does prison time. That's my theory.
Okay.
And I
can see
actually
it.
would love that for the character, because I think that would be like a really interesting thing if you go back and watch his 2 episodes of TOS. If you were like knowledgeable of the fact that he went through all this shit, and then he's like, because he's in the episode where Kirk and McCoy and Chekhov get like super old, the deadly years. So like,
right.
You know, they're like, hey, we got to call the war criminal from second shift come in here because McCoy's all fucked up.
So one thing that was interesting about that fight scene was that it was just super out of place, like having like just some really long, like, you know, whatever fight scene in Star Trek.
It was from Bourne. Like it was like a Jason Bourne movie.
But it was also, as a nerd who really enjoys fight choreography and martial arts stuff, watching it at least, it was not very well choreographed as a fight. No. Which was like, you know, there's like the CW has this thing where like all their fight scenes are sort of look the same, where it's like a bunch of people run at each other and then they all do like moves in time, like they're dancing.
Right.
And it wasn't even that. It was like even worse than that, in the sense that it was like none of the way the people were attacking them made no sense. Nobody had phasers. It was just like, what is going on here? This is this random brawl in the middle of this Star Trek episode. And I understand why they did it later, obviously, but that was really the first 2 episodes actually were my least favorite of all the episodes, I think. So
really,
yeah, I really liked this one. I liked the decision. I liked Mabenga and Chapel like jumping out of the airlock and taking the leap of faith. I thought that was cool. I thought that was really cool.
I felt like there was
Spock making the decision that he's gonna fire, anyways, was interesting. I did not like him yelling "You do not die." Made me mad. I think they went overboard on the Spock emotions thing, and we'll get to how much I hated that in charades eventually. But they went overboard on that. A little bit is fine. Doing it in the Lower Decks episode where it's for comedy is one thing. And in that moment, that's another thing where like if I was in the writer's room, I'd be adding the April scene and I'd be saying, nope, you're cutting that line, that you do not die. We do not need that.
Yeah.
He can make that look with his face and not say that.
Let him
not
act.
inform the dumb people in the audience. If you're too dumb to pick up that he's thinking do not die without having the dialogue, then you should not be watching Star Trek. You should have enough emotional intelligence to know that he doesn't want her to die without him saying it.
Yeah. You're my will they, direction. Won't they, you know?
Yeah, and Ethan Peck does so good in the show. I have a feeling there's a take where he didn't say that, and if he was on a lie detector, if he was on that little thing from the second episode, it would light up if he said, if he was trying to say that he was fine with that line, because I bet he wasn't. I bet he didn't like that line. And so if he's in the little light up chair in the second episode, it's lighting up. Yeah. You know, because no. And by the way, I don't know if you saw the pictures of Ethan Peck from last weekend with the what's his name that played Spock in the JJ movies.
Oh, right. Zachary Quinto.
Zachary Quinto. It was great. They they staged the internet meme where Ethan Peck's standing and then
A distracted boyfriend or whatever.
yeah,
Is that what it is?
yeah, they staged that in real life, which is great. There's a good sense of humor about it. But Sarah, your thoughts on the first episode? Have we not hit it?
Yeah, I mean, it was it's sort of funny that I like the fact that in all of the treks they have these episodes where if you disobey a direct order, it's got to work out. Because one of the things that I loved so much about the first season of Discovery is that, you can almost picture these people getting together and saying, all right, let's create a Jim Kirk character, except what if Jim Kirk does Jim Kirk things and it doesn't work out for them? And Burnham represents that character. Burnham represents this character where if all of her, mutiny stuff had worked out, they probably would have been like, okay, try not to do that again, but also here's a gold star and a promotion. That's what they do in Star Trek, and it's fine. So I almost appreciate when they do it here, just because,
I'm
Strange New Worlds
Burnham, just for the record.
Same here.
I know you are. I appreciate that. I feel like I'm happy that when it happens in Strange New Worlds, because there's this sort of reputation that Strange New Worlds has, because ever since, Discovery Season 2 came out, there were all of these obnoxious, toxic people who were like, oh, Captain Pike has saved this show. And then they did the whole petition thing. And there were a lot of people who signed that petition who unfortunately were doing so because they just desperately needed their charismatic white male captain. If they didn't have it, they were having temper tantrums. Mm-hmm. And so I like the fact that Strange New World is making the same mistakes, quote unquote, that the other treks have done, just so that we can later, when we're in arguments on the internet with these men, be like, oh no, Strange New Worlds did this as well. Do you see this?
And all those people who thought Strange New Worlds was their straight non-political Star Trek got a gay as fuck season 2, and that's great. Like, so even the episodes that I don't like I appreciate that they pissed off a lot of the toxic fandom people at the same time. It's funny because when I talk about the musical episode, and you'll see every time I wrote about it, people would be like, wait, did you like it or did you hate it? And I'm like, both.
We have to make sure we allocate enough time to discuss the musical episode, because I feel like
we'll get there. Yeah. So anything else, Sarah, on episode 1? You've given a lot of nodding towards your opinion, like when we've been talking, but did we miss anything? Because there's a lot of stuff.
I think it was an adequate episode. It's kind of like one of those, the thing about Strange New Worlds that I don't like is that so many problems are wrapped up so simply. And this obviously happened in all of the other episodic Trek. It happened in TNG. It happened, because they have only a short amount of time to tell often a very complex story, and they have to wrap up a complex problem in 5 minutes. So they did that here, and there's often a sort of they're in danger and then they're not, and they're in a complex situation and then they're suddenly not. That kind of thing can create a sense of whiplash with the audience. But other than that, it was fine. I neither hated it nor loved it. It was just sort of there.
I loved Klingon Spock getting drunk with the Klingons.
Yeah.
And when April's dressing him down and Spock says, could you not speak so loudly?
Yeah.
And
are you hungover, Mr. Spock? Yeah. Are you hungover? Yeah.
Yeah. And when Pelia says my Klingon's a little rusty, but did he say may your blood scream? He's like, I'm beginning to understand the meaning of this. That whole scene was great. I loved it.
Stuff.
That was good stuff. It adds some context to Spock.
That's definitely in Spock's nature, right?
Yeah.
Leonard Nimoy Spock would lift a cup and talk peace. He would do whatever the culture required, and if that meant getting shit-faced, then Spock would do it.
Well, I will bring up that if you watch really closely in Undiscovered Country, that Leonard Nimoy never eats any of the food that's on the table. because when they put the food down, he was like, Spock's vegetarian. He's not going to
Okay.
eat this. And like, if you watch very closely, he never picks up his fork or never touches any of the food. And that was specifically because Leonard Nimoy was like, no, he's not going to eat this. He would never eat this.
Yeah.
So there is a little, I would push back a little bit on that. And then that's one of the things, of course, that I hated about charades, but we'll get there. As one of the two vegans on this show right now. But I did like that whole thing. I did like because that's Spock's first time taking command. That, you know, I also like the history of seeing Spock's command. For me, it's really important. I do want this to be the past of the shows that we've seen. And so whenever the characters are doing things, like, I want the writers to sit down and think of, okay, the Spock who was in Errand of Mercy has this in his experience. I want them to think about those things.
I don't think about it this way, and I haven't heard. We haven't talked about this, but I think this is all just like a soft reboot. And the way I think about it is, this is like, we're going to get a reboot of TOS, and this is like exactly what we're getting. Forget about that J.J. Abrams stuff. This is how you reboot Star Trek. You just spend 10 seasons of other shows building up to
right. They go back and forth on that, and that's one of the things that's inconsistent, because there's sometimes where they're really tight about the canon, and then there's other times where I'm like, are they paying attention? So, and we'll get to that with different things, specifically, you know, in the last two, or in the musical episode specifically, they tie to really two important pieces of canon with Roger Corby and Carol Marcus, right? And it's funny seeing how, like, some of the people who don't pay attention very closely, like, listen, I know Wrath of Khan is a movie that I can quote from beginning to end. I've seen it more than any other movie in my life. But when people are like, Kirk didn't know that Carol Marcus had to... No, he did. He said, I stayed away because you asked me to.
Mm-hmm.
And the first thing he says is this David? He knew he had a son. He knew he had a son. And when I saw all, like, the people who are angry about, like, the canon not being respected, saying, like, that's bullshit, that shows that, you know, have you watched Wrath of Khan? Because I have, and that is correct. Anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself.
That little kid looked nothing like Ricardo Montalban. That was
Does any little kid look like Ricardo Montalban?
Well, that's part of one of the reasons why I want to strike Tomorrow from the record.
Like,
but
God damn, that kid is suave.
So Ad Astra Para Espera is the courtroom episode. And I definitely like this episode on second watch better. I liked it when I saw it the first time. I like all the nods to canon with, like, the lie detector chair and the uniforms and the bells and all the stuff that they did in the episode with the trial. I thought it was kind of a stretch to have Patel be the prosecuting starship captain. Like,
that was convenient for the plot. To keep Pike away, right?
I really liked the lady who was the Illyrian attorney. Desire for world building, when they showed the Illyrian planet and the skyline, I'm like, oh, tell me about this planet. No, I don't care about the trial. Tell me about this planet. So I had a little bit of that, and I was kind of sad that only one scene was there. I kind of wish that they had moved the trial there for some stupid reason. It wouldn't have made sense, but anyways, I really liked the Vulcan prosecutor guy who's like, enough of all this nonsense. Let's get logical.
Right.
I liked that. I liked that Una gave herself up. Thought that was a good twist. I liked that the lawyer figured that out. I thought it was a little weird that there is a history in Star Trek of characters watching Star Trek trials. So
right.
You know, that joke about Menagerie is an episode of Star Trek where people watch Star Trek. It's
Yeah, I thought the courtroom stuff fell a little flat. I felt like we'd seen it before, but it wasn't quite as good as the ones we've seen before. I thought that Patel being the prosecutor was a nod to Riker being the prosecutor in the
Measure Man, yeah.
Right.
Which was just a better version of, kind of the same thing, I thought. But yeah, it was fine. I didn't not like it. I definitely feel like the season hadn't quite taken off yet. But it was fine. They had to resolve that from last season or whatever. So
the absolute best moment of that episode, having rewatched it last night, is Robert April getting grilled on the stand for breaking the Prime Directive. And then the next scene going to Pike's quarters, and Pike pours him the drink, and he just walks out without drinking it, and Pike pours it all in his glass.
Yeah, good stuff.
Great. I love that. One of the things that is missing in this season with Pike, and one of the things I liked about Pike so much in Discovery season 2, was I loved that, I want more of the captain who walks on the bridge and says, "What shitstorm did I warp into this time?"
Yeah.
I want a little bit more of the "I don't give a fuck" Pike. Because here he's a little bit more camp counselor, like cooking demo guy.
Yeah.
So I think they've lost a little bit of Pike in this season, and that could be just that he's getting closer to dying, so that could make sense. But we could address that in the Lower Decks episode. But anyone have anything else specifically they want to say about the courtroom?
I do.
Oh, here she goes. She's ready. Don't throw slippers at us.
This could have been a beautiful episode. This could have been, Measure of the Man level Trek. Could have been. And I feel like one of the reasons why I give it a B- is that it's, again, they keep, and what this has always been my fear for Star Trek. My biggest fear for Star Trek is you want it to be successful enough to keep going, but you don't want it to be so successful that it starts dumbing things down for the collective, homogenized audience of America. And I think it kind of feels like that's what they're doing in some of these episodes. And the thing is, like, if the flashbacks that she had where, she's going through the big emotional speech at the end, and they flash back to what she said 5 seconds ago.
Yeah, that was bad.
Even if it had been the flashbacks of what she said at the beginning of the episode or something, if she had said those lines in private to somebody else, so it's for the benefit of the audience, but it's not going on in the courtroom, I would have forgiven it. It still would have been a bit heavy-handed. But the way that they did it with them literally showing us flashbacks from what they just showed us. I was
still
like,
not
oh
as bad
my
as
God.
You Do Not Die.
Are you writing this entire show for people who are on their phones the whole time? Like, you have that little respect for the audience? Like, Jesus Christ. Like, I laughed. It was the emotional climax of the episode, and I started giggling because I was like, what the fuck? Seriously? Are they going to actually replay what they just showed?
What was also a little weird is that they took a really weird way to get to the asylum thing. Like, why didn't she just ask for asylum? Like, I didn't understand why they had to have this whole complicated thing. And then the lawyer figures out.
I just figured out why those people think that Kirk didn't know about David. It's because they were looking at their phones. That's definitely what happened. Go ahead. Sorry, Issa. Repeat.
No, that was it. I felt like the whole, the whole Illyrian thing, you can't be in Star Trek, whatever, it seemed that didn't really resonate with me very well. Like, I understand that they're doing a lot with the whole eugenics wars and
Julian Bashir is going to go through it again in 100 years. So
yeah, so
it ain't over.
It was an interesting choice to focus on that, but I feel like they just solved it with her asking for asylum, and it was sort of like they turned it into this whole like usual suspects trick kind of thing when it didn't really need to be that.
Right. Well, no one came up with it except for the lawyer, who's like had to kind of like, who, by the way, I thought was excellent. Like,
maybe I misunderstood, but I thought the lawyer had figured out that Una had planned to seek asylum, but for some reason couldn't ask
No.
for asylum herself.
No,
And
that
No.
she turned herself in and then decided to ask for asylum on her behalf. It was just very sloppily told. It was like, well, Una's too stupid and Pike is too stupid to offer this to her. So I'm just going to throw the rule book back in everybody's face and say, hey, that's basically asking for asylum and basically being offered
she
asylum.
looks at the Uniform Code of Justice and then she finds all these examples, and that's why she puts April on there on the stand to say, like, hey, you guys fudge the rules all the fucking time.
But there was supposed to be some element of number one had planned this all along, but for some reason couldn't say that she wanted asylum. I didn't quite understand that. I
think they were trying to say that Una had, that number one had that she had turned herself in because she was tired of hiding, and then like the lawyer still kind of figured out, like, well, that's convenient for us because that will fit into our strategy.
No, but remember,
that's the way I saw it.
There was the whole thing about Lon trying to figure out how she'd gotten turned in. And
Lon was afraid that she had
accidentally. Right. But the whole point was that it was a secret that that number one had turned herself in, and the lawyer had to figure that out so she could ask for asylum. And I didn't quite understand why they were doing that.
Yeah. Because
it wasn't a good enough episode to worry about it too.
All right, now for the episode that I despise with every fiber of my being.
I like this one. This was when I thought it got really good. This is the horror. This was like the horror Uhura episode, right? Isn't that the third one?
No, third one.
This is time travel, like Toronto.
This is Toronto.
The time travel Toronto one, which I also really liked.
Well, listen, I will say that it was finally executed. Like, the performances were good. Paul Wesley, I did not buy him as Kirk in the first season. I think he's gotten better.
I still see him as Stefan Salvatore, and I really like him. So that I might be biased as a vampire.
From what? Vampire Diaries. Okay,
I highly recommend.
I've never seen it.
It's if you can get, just a quick aside into Vampire Diaries, if you can get past the first 5 episodes of like teenness, it's a really good show. Okay,
all right. Well, I sat through Stargirl, so I might be able to try Vampire Diaries.
So it's very good. It's very teen.
So I don't want to look like I'm complaining about Christina Chong or I have any problem with her performance. I just don't think the Noonien Singh name and the baggage that brings to the character has been worth it. I think she could have just been a different character and it would have been fine. I was nervous about that name being brought in, like having Officer Hitler on your crew.
Like, I mean, he's not Adolf Hitler. He's Hans, his great grandson, but still, exactly. Yeah.
Having
like for me, if you're gonna
character like is whatever. And so in this whole storyline of the whole time travel thing, like this episode just did not work for me. It was such an obvious, like, we film in Toronto, so we're gonna go to Toronto and we want to do a car chase and yawn and like another alternate reality that doesn't make any sense, because as soon as they start doing the alternate reality and I start doing the math about like, why would Kirk be the captain? And then they start talking about the world building of this universe. And then why do they even have a Starfleet in this universe? And why do they even have a starship? And why do they have all that? That it just broke my brain. It made no story logic sense. So to me, it's like, as soon as they're in that alternate reality, I'm checked out, think it's stupid, can't buy it at any point. And then when you get to Toronto, then it's just story for story reasons. And then all the logic of that episode made no writing sense. Like, how did they get to Vermont to get to Pelia. And how many fucking games of chess do you
They-
have to play to get
they-
enough money to get that hotel room? None of it made any sense. It was dumb as a fucking box
Yeah.
of rocks.
So
episode-
ridiculous.
Wait, hold on, Des.
Ridiculous.
What-
No, Issa, that episode was stupid as fuck. And if you try to defend it, I'm never
I am completely the opposite. It had some of my favorite science fiction elements in it. It had the alien race trying to keep humans stupid so we don't go out and cause problems in the universe. That's one of like my favorite stories. Like I love
Causing David physical pain.
This episode was so stupid.
it had this beautiful story of Lon falling in love with this alternate Kirk and then having to deal with the fact
Yes,
that
we get
he's
it.
got
It's a
normal
reverse
Kirk.
city on the edge of forever. Yes, we get it.
That was so good. I really thought that was very well done.
Kirk is Edith Keeler. We get it. It's fine. We get it. But
I
I understand
felt
what
that
they're
the-
trying to do. But
the
the
I was a
execution
little-
was dumb as shit.
I thought it was worked really well. I could watch. I mean, just them being like again. I
Yes,
might
their
have a soft
performance was
spot.
fine. Their performance
I might
was
have a soft
fine.
spot for Kirk. I liked the alternate story. I liked he was born on the USS Iowa, just like his brother.
Right, which doesn't make a fucking lick of sense, like that they even have a Starfleet.
Because
and that
Earth was
Kirk would
destroyed.
be in
They
this
didn't
position
have
and, like,
Starfleet. They just had warships. Like they weren't Starfleet. That was the whole point.
It
United
just-
Earth.
it
Yeah,
just
United
stressed-
Earth.
It's like Picard season 2 with that alternative reality that just pushed too much
Okay.
Yeah.
I thought it was a good
quality.
episode. I
Never-
felt that it was a nice character development for Lon, and it made me like her as a character a million times more.
I will say her performance was good. Paul Wesley's performance was good. It was entertaining enough.
Well, there you
It
go.
was fine. Except you can have a fine performance and a dumb as shit plot, and it's a dumb as shit plot, and for me, this is one that if I was in the writer's room, if I'm Akiva Goldsman, and this person sends me the script, I say, thank you, but here's what you need to do in the next draft. Otherwise, we can't do this episode. And on top of that, I really don't want a car chase in Toronto. We did a car chase in LA in Picard season 2. And don't you people watch the other Star Treks that we do? We've already done this. And it
I'm
was
with you. I'm
painful
with
in
you.
that episode, in that series. Let's not make it painful here. Nope, this was a terrible episode. This is as bad as the fairy tale episode, in my opinion.
No way. No way. I would watch
I don't know if I'd say that
Toronto
either.
episode
but-
again. A lot of good things in it. There was we're in New York City. Like that was hilarious.
Right.
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 There were a
I
lot of
laughed.
good
I'll grant
things.
you
I
that
laughed.
joke.
I okay.
Sarah has been quiet on this episode.
It's hard for me to judge the episode too harshly because I'm grading Strange New Worlds on a curve right now in the opposite direction because Charades was so dumb that it's hard. Like tomorrow was actually significantly better than Charades. Did I love it? No. But because Charades was so dumb, it's really hard to actually have a functioning scale because it's all over the place.
I would say the exact opposite. I would say that about Charades wasn't as bad to me as Tomorrow. So like I'll say the exact same thing, but the opposite. But sorry.
I almost wrote an entire essay. The only reason I didn't is because I'm busy planning a freaking convention right now, and I'm working like 7 days a week. That is the only reason I did not write an entire episode about how Charades had no respect for the way that Spock's entire character has been built up.
Well, we'll get there, and I'm with you, sister, because I totally agree with you. I hated the depiction of Spock in that episode with 10,000 burning suns of energy.
You guys have to let young Spock be young Spock. He's exploring his half human, half Vulcan side. Come on. Give him some
We'll get there. We'll get there. Because I'm ready. I'm wound up on that one.
As the resident Canadian, I feel it necessary to say a few things. I know that there's a dilation of time in filmmaking and whatnot. But
How did you
first,
feel about the poutine jokes? How did you feel about that as a Canadian? Because
Just
that
dumb.
offended me, and I'm not
but you
Canadian.
know what? But you know what? I'm Canadian, so I've heard that my entire life. So that it's just it was definite eye roll. Look, there's some stuff this season that got good laughs from me, and I'll say the Lower Decks episode, I laughed at that way more than I have at any other Lower Decks episode. I adored it.
That's because Lower Decks should not have been a cartoon.
Right. So first of all, Toronto to Vermont in the winter is probably an 8.5 hour drive, just to say that.
Sure.
And then also,
Well,
how many?
It's barely a winter. Come on.
How
do you get
big?
across the fucking border without any ID?
Yeah, so that's another thing. Yeah, it's still Canada, right? She said that in the place that at that time is called Canada. She said, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Still
So
Canada.
it's still Canada, and you have to cross a border. And I've done that plenty of times in my life, and it's not easy. Something tells me that it's also not easy in that era. Seemingly the only technological advance further from where we are, other than, you know, the genetic enhancements of humans, is the hand panel to open the door, like the hand scan to open the door. Everything else seems like it could have been, like, I'm guessing that's 2150 or something. No, because 2150 is when Enterprise is going, or has already gone, right?
Yeah.
When does this take place?
And I hate the retconning of Khan.
No, me too. But hold on, I haven't even gotten to
fixed all that. Homie of the podcast, Greg Cox, with his Eugenics Wars novels, they fixed that, and they should have left it alone.
Right. So also all those chess games. One, I truly appreciate Kurt being like a chess shark. I love that idea. But how many games of high stakes chess did he have to pay to afford a fucking hotel suite in downtown Toronto in, I don't know, the year 2065 or whatever, which I'm assuming is going to be a lot more than it is now, which is already prohibitively expensive.
By the way, on this here podcast, John Ordiver, in his fucking robe last time, knew about this Khan retcon, and he hinted at it because his books were getting destroyed, and
Right.
he knew. And
I
think
think
he gave us all a hint that he
Yeah.
knew this was coming, and couldn't say anything in his robe. But
Yeah. And so I also agree with all, like, the Noonien Singh. Like, if you're gonna have that name, it better be something, and it really just hasn't.
I think we
No.
should suspend our judgment on that and see where they go with it, because
Right.
I think they're going to do something with it.
they're
And
clearly going to be
season
playing with
3
it.
probably.
There's also, they've really played up like the temporal police thing or whatever. Like, I think there are a lot of things that could happen there that we should probably withhold judgment on. And
That's fair.
give them the benefit.
It is still something that's hanging there until it's actually, you know,
And remember,
until
it's been 2 seasons, but it's only been 20 episodes, right?
Right.
So it's not like we're deep into Strange New Worlds yet.
That's true. Yeah, very true.
okay, anything
But,
else
yeah.
on tomorrow before we take a little break?
Yeah, I'll agree with you in that this one was like, I gotta wait another week for another Star Trek after this. You know, like, it takes place in Toronto, and it looks like every single television show that was on television 20 years ago. It's everything from 2000 to 2007. Every New York, you know, it's either Vancouver or Toronto, but it's set in New York, and it all looks the same to me. And I've been there and I've seen those places, and it completely takes me out.
Well, I have to
Completely
add,
takes-
I have
That fart of
crossed-
an episode. It was
Hold on,
terrible. It was bad.
I have crossed the American-Canadian border many times, not exactly legally. I'm pretty sure I can say that. And it's not that hard to do.
Hold on.
Well,
I'm getting my phone.
Well, listen, and the fact that they're reversing and reverse engineering one of the most beloved episodes doesn't help it for me.
That's
and
true.
like, to me, that's exactly the same thing as J.J. Abrams having Spock yell, "Khan!" It's like, no,
But that's yeah. I mean,
it's exactly the same. It's exactly the
listen,
same. By having Kirk be the Edith Keeler of this episode, it's exactly the same.
Stranger World is so much better than the Abrams track that I don't even feel that you can compare in that.
No, the
I don't
Abrams
think
thing was
that's
terrible.
true.
The Khan
That's not
straight
true.
was what? But all right, let's take a little break. And well, it won't be a break for the people at home, but for us, it will be.
All right.
All right, we're back, but none of you people know that. So anyways, Among the Lotus Eaters, the sequel to The Cage, the very first Star Trek pilot. And because of that, that's one of the reasons why I probably liked it more than some people. I love that this pays off the scene where Pike gets drunk with his former doctor, Dr. Boyce, in the cage and laments about losing the people on the away mission to Rigel 7, and we get a sequel to that conversation, basically, where we find out that he didn't lose those well, he did, but they're still alive. And so this was because he was so beat up about the people, like losing the people on that away mission in the cage. It's kind of interesting that they're still alive. And then there's this okay, so there's the whole like people don't have memories on that planet, and it's kind of a weird episode, but I liked it. I liked that they had to come up with a solution. I liked Spock coming up with the idea that you have the pad with your history on it, so to remind you who you are. That was a good Spock solution. I just thought this was a good Star Trek episode. It was not, there was nothing super special about it, but I liked that it tied to canon, and I liked that it was Pike centric ish, even though he doesn't know who he is half the episode.
Right.
But it's so important to Pike's character because it ties back to the cage. So as a Pike guy, I like that. But I could see where certain people would find this episode to be a little boring and weird. And I like the idea that there are certain people that are like, this is great. I don't remember how shitty my life is, so I don't want to remember. Which was kind of an interesting thing. And it actually is very, and this is weird. This isn't going to mean anything to anybody else, but I'm listening to the audiobook of High Country, the John Jackson Miller Strange New Worlds novel right now. And I'm halfway through it, and it's very similar to this episode in a lot of weird ways, and actually kind of pays off some of the Rigel 7 stuff too, which is weird, but and means nothing to anyone who's not reading that novel or listening to it on audiobook. But I'm listening to the audiobook of that, so in a weird way, when I rewatched this episode, it had different resonance because of that. Anyone have any thoughts on Among the Lotus Eaters that they really got to get off their chest before we start tearing charades apart?
Get the charades.
Yeah, let's do it. I just thought it was boring.
It was
All
fine.
right.
It wasn't good. It wasn't bad.
Yeah, it was whatever. Yeah.
Could have left it out. I just do want to say one thing. The only thing that I didn't like about it in the course of the season was that it gave them too many "there's some strange unknown radiation affecting our brains" episodes. That was my only complaint. It was just like that seemed repetitive as it happened again and again. But
there's a lot of strange radiation in space. But well, if you think about how many times TOS repeated things, like how many godlike beings they came in touch with, how many times Kirk talked down a computer. I mean, they repeat shit.
No, for sure.
I'm just reminded of the offhand remark in those old scientists episode with, I can't remember the guy with the cybernetic implant, but he's like, right. He's like, you think I'll be able to measure tachyons? Oh, I can't wait to measure tachyons.
Hey, we'll get there.
So
Sarah, you have anything on Among the Lotus Eaters? Like, nah, it is just kind of a typical Star Trek episode.
It's funny. I have a lot of things to say about episodes I love, and I have a lot of things to say about episodes I hate. And then there are episodes that are just sort of there, and it's fine. They're like TNG
Exactly.
filler episodes.
Yeah.
And I
But
get
also, but also, we only have 10 episodes a season. So why do we have these filler episodes? They've shown that they can do some great stuff, you know, and it's just
But see, I'm the one that's going to defend this as not a filler episode because of its importance towards the cage, because
Okay.
it pays off things from Rigel 7, which goes back to the matte paintings in the cage, you know, like this is the planet from the matte paintings in the cage. And it may
also
seem like it's a filler episode, but to me, that's important to the history of Star Trek. So when they said we're going back to Rigel 7, I'm one of the fucking nerds that was like, ooh.
I think it also
So-
adds weight to the decision in the finale to not leave people behind. You know, like
Yeah.
I think that was an important point for Pike. They didn't really make it,
Which is
like,
why Pike is playing with the thing that she gave him, and yeah, that saved his life in this episode. So it does set up stuff that happens later. Yes. And but for me, I cannot look at this as a filler episode because I am such a fucking nerd for the canon. And you know, and I really honestly was when I was watching it that morning when they said we have to go back to Rigel 7, like I'm one of the few people that was like, gosh, we're going back to Rigel 7.
Right.
We're
Like,
definitely one of the few people who thought that.
yes, I immediately did that. Just like when I saw Clint Howard in
Yeah,
this series.
I
like,
marked out for Clint Howard. Yeah,
See,
for sure.
I went straight to Rock and Roll High School with Clint Howard.
Even though Clint Howard has a line of dialogue that is canon breaking and terrible for me, fact that he said I gave a whole case of Romulan ale to get you here, when they shouldn't have had any contact with Romulans
Right.
at this point. So I did want to throw a slipper at the episode.
Wait, didn't Romulan ale predate contact with the Romulans in the sense of seeing them and knowing who they are?
Like they have a distribution
do we
system.
drink Romulan ale now? We don't know Romulans, so like how?
No, but did they not
I'm trying to
have
think.
Romulan ale on TOS before they had the episode where they met the Romulans?
Romulan ale was first mentioned in Wrath of Khan, so it was
Okay, I don't know. I'm just making stuff up.
Yeah, it was McCoy had illegal Romulan ale, right? And he was like, I only use it for medicinal purposes, which is a great line. But all right, we're moving on from Among the Lotus Eaters. I'm the minority report on this one.
Quick mention that Eduardo Sanchez directed that. Guy who directed Blair Witch Project.
What did he direct?
Blair Witch Project.
Oh, Blair Witch. Yeah, that's right.
Wait a minute.
And a lot of people
Which
were
had a
like,
director? I thought that was just found.
Oh no! Hate to break it to you.
Yeah, because I remember somebody saying like, "Oh, they got a big horror director," and it wasn't a horror episode, and that was strange. All right, let's do it. Let's get your pitchforks ready. It's charades time. So this episode is obviously the love triangle, and apparently the sixth. Well, I guess it was episode 5, so it wasn't 6. But so we're gonna get a Goofy Spock episode every season, and it's interesting because of how the T'Pring thing works out. Eventually, in a month time, that we're doing comedy episodes about it. But the lady that plays T'Pring is awesome at playing straight. So I get why they would say let's do another comedy episode there.
And I really like the episode that she had in the first season.
Yeah,
really
I thought, and again, like maybe this would have annoyed me less if they hadn't done the body swap thing in the last season.
Right.
And it's like too many, it's like going to the same well too many times or whatever. However, and I know Sarah and I are about to be on the same page on this, I absolutely despised what they did to Spock's character in this episode. I thought it broke everything about Spock, and I kept thinking about perhaps this is the reason why years later Spock decided to do Kolinar, is because he still had this trauma in his life, but whatever. I fucking hated what they did to Spock's character, even though I thought Ethan Peck did a fine job playing it.
Right.
But at the same time, I thought it was terrible. And we can get into little details, the things that really bother me. But okay, so his Vulcan DNA gets worn down. That doesn't mean his entire behavior changes, or that he's going to just suddenly stop. Like, his brain didn't get changed to the point where he couldn't remember how to be a Vulcan. And the fact that they were sitting around teaching him how to be himself.
It's so ridiculous.
I wanted to cry. I was so upset.
Yeah. Bad.
I was like, oh my God. Like that whole scene, how to talk like a Vulcan, was just, I was like, oh my God. He didn't lose his fucking memory. Like, there's a difference. Memory.
I can handle him laughing.
That they remove everything that made him physically Vulcan. That's fine. Yeah. But you can either play it, he lost his memory, or you can play it, he still has his memory, but he has all of these human emotions. And one of the frustrating things about this episode is that there was so much potential. It could have been very funny. It could have been really well done. And I think overall with Strange New Worlds, I feel like I'm constantly watching rough drafts. Maybe because of the way that the budget works, maybe because of the speed at which these things get produced now, but I feel like we're losing the golden age of television and we're reverting back to the unfortunate mess that preceded it. Because I feel like I just feel like I'm keep watching these rough drafts that should never have been allowed to be aired. I'm like, did they just go with the first draft of writing that they have and not check it internally? Like, there's no character consistency in who Spock is. And I get that they remade who Spock is for this show, and that's fine. But you can only change it 10, 20%. You can't go back and forth and say, okay, well, in this episode, he's gonna be 2% Spock. And for no reason, but the internal logic of the episode made zero sense. It was maddening.
I disagree with all three of you on this. That wasn't the part that bothered me. I was bothered by like how it looked like an episode of Friends or whatever, and just almost was like, one step further would have been slapstick. But I think about a human, if they have some kind of like traumatic brain injury or something, their whole personality can change. I think him being human would explain all those changes, and I thought that was completely within the realm of the internal logic of the episode. Also, I feel like there's a long history of almost like wish fulfillment of nearly human characters becoming human, and I think I didn't hate that. I just thought that her family was a little over the top silly.
If they had mentioned memory loss once, then a lot of that could have been forgiven.
But it wasn't memory.
I remember that I had a human mother and a Vulcan father, but I don't remember any of the details. I don't, something like that.
It wasn't memory loss. It was that his emotions were completely different, and so everything was new to him. And people don't.
He's not going to sit there and eat a fucking plate of bacon.
Talk like a Vulcan. Why did his mother have to explain to him this tea ceremony that he would have known about? Exactly. Why did all of these little details and they played it for comedy? And I'm like, oh my God.
Of bacon.
Yeah, okay. I mean, I'm with you on the food thing. They have
Leonard Nimoy would not eat the fake food that no one would have noticed he was eating in undiscovered country. Because Spock is a vegetarian.
Well, it's
and Ethan Peck starts fucking gobbling down bacon.
It's replicated. It's not pig. Come on.
Except for Pike was just saying you can't use
real ingredients. Yeah, real ingredients.
They have a pig that they slaughter on the Enterprise.
I've already thought about that, but at the same time, like, I wouldn't eat lab-grown meat, and I know
I wouldn't either.
Exactly. So
that scene was an opportunity. Like, he could have. It would have been hilarious if he had the same reaction to the bacon, and he starts shoveling it in his mouth, and Pike's like, "Oh, whoa."
Or if he threw up.
Well, he did say, "Why do I feel nauseous?" He did say that. So, that's part of the problem for me is that So all of a sudden, Spock's DNA is entirely human, and that's going to wipe out the entirety of his experience as
Exactly.
a
I hate
living
that.
being.
Yes.
It makes no sense whatsoever.
No sense.
And I'm okay with
because
him going
plot.
from ultra reserved Spock to like douche bro guy Spock. If there's some sort
Vulcans
of
can be such jerks. Come on.
right. Although I have to say, I did get a laugh in the actual charades part of the episode where Pike is trying to explain sounds like, and he tugs on his ear and he's like, sounds like, and and T'Pring's dad's like, ear. I just burst out laughing for some. It just
no, there were
stupid.
plenty of funny moments in the episode,
yeah.
but just overall, it was just stupid. And
it was a sitcom setup, right? It was an amnesiac sitcom setup. He had it. It's so stupid. They can never explain anything.
Yeah,
they just have to go
Spock, not
immediately
Jack
to
Tripper.
Subterfuge. Exactly.
Yeah,
But I'm just explaining how it's a bad plot. It's a bad sitcom plot transposed
And
over
if
Star
anything,
Trek.
if you're gonna do a bunch of
hold on,
Spock-
which is a show that is so entrenched in science, and they're seemingly saying that it's entirely nature and not nurture at all.
Well, and for me, if you have Spock be the straight man in all these comedies, then that's how you do Spock comedy.
Right, of course.
The other thing is that this was the moment that so many of us have been waiting for, that have shipped Spock and Chapel, even when we shipped Spock and Chapel in TOS, okay? And so the fact that this was so poorly done, that moment was so poorly done, I feel robbed. Like, throughout the whole episode, they had all of this opportunity. They had a golden opportunity to make a really funny, really sexy episode where Spock is like, oh my God, I have all of these human feelings for Nurse Chapel. Instead, they did almost nothing with that. They had that one weird scene in the hallway where he like notices that she's not feeling well, or that she's unhappy, and that was fine. But they almost had Spock be more upset about T'Pring's mom not liking him and not approving him in an episode where he's supposed to find out or discover that he's in love with Nurse Chapel than he felt about actually bumping into and working with and being around Nurse Chapel. Like, he's supposed to be this human teenager with uncontrollable feelings, and there's not one scene where how that would actually play in real life if he had this secret crush on Chapel. And the only reason why he's been able to keep a lid on it is because he's Vulcan. They take away his Vulcanness and it never happens. It's like somebody literally forgot to put that scene in. It's just
the episode, it was a very bad episode. It had some funny moments, but it was just a very bad episode. And the thing about it, and another thing, they just it's like sometimes they get the canon so right when they do things like Pike's, like Kirk saying, I met Pike when he made fleet captain, and then they have him be temporarily promoted, so that's the same thing. That's great, but at the same time you have Pike saying, oh, I put extra salt in it because our starships are hotter than a Vulcan kitchen. Are you fucking serious? Vulcan is a hot as fuck planet.
It's like Mars, basically. It's like just like a desert, right?
Right. So how the hell is his kitchen warmer than a Vulcan than for Vulcan food? No.
Yeah,
like,
no sense.
Who does not know that? Who's writing a Vulcan-centric episode? You do not have a Vulcan-centric episode written by somebody who's so goddamn dumb about Vulcan that they don't even know that it's a hot fucking planet. Like, fucking, that is basic Trek. That is basic.
I have never seen you so worked up, David.
That threw me through the roof in that moment because I'm like immediately taken out of the episode, because I'm like, that is a simple thing to know. That is a simple thing to know. And if you're writing this episode, and just like the whole thing with the Romulan ale, you get like, they haven't met Romulans yet, because if you've watched Balance of Terror, you know that. So how the fuck does Clint Howard's character have a case of Romulan ale? He shouldn't. And I'm sorry, but like, they need a Pablo Hidalgo, like the guy who fixes everything in Star Wars, who watches over everything and says, no, that's not canon. Who's watching the ship on this? Because I hate to be Canon Watch guy, but it's just, if you have one of those, fine. You have two of those, fine. But they had a bunch of those this season that just don't make any sense. And to me, it's just a lack of attention to detail.
Yeah.
Like, I don't expect Anson Mount to know that, but I expect someone on the writing staff to know that. I expect someone on the writing staff to say, that doesn't make sense. Vulcan is a hot as fuck planet. It's Arizona world. Like,
somebody should have known that. Somebody should have known that. Yeah.
Vulcans are definitely coming to San Diego to get out of the heat. Sorry to make fun of Zonies. That joke doesn't make sense to anyone who doesn't live here.
No,
My neighborhood is constantly filled with people from Arizona.
I remember all the I thought you were making a joke about how all the scene kids and the punk scene kids in San Diego in a certain time period looked like Romulans, kind of.
They did. It's true. It's true. That
Like,
all the Vulcans guys,
like
yeah, they did all
mid-90s,
have Vulcan. and
Oh shit.
They did. Yeah.
Oh.
I
like,
see
that was
their
a deep cut, you know?
I see one of their dudes is at my co-op all the time, and he still has that hair.
Awesome.
All right, so charades. There's got. I mean, I don't know. I think we hit it pretty hard, but
I was trying to
Woof.
be nice to it. It was a terrible episode.
Woof. Yeah.
well, I say woof.
The only other thing I have to add about that episode is that of all of the people that Spock would have told, he would have told his mom immediately. Like, he
Yes.
would have been terrified. She is the only human in his life. He has all these memories of her, and the idea that he would have been embarrassed about it in front of her. Yes, Sarek, her, no, not in a million years.
Mhm.
And shout out to the actor who plays Amanda Grayson. She is recovering from cancer and came back to do that episode, and she was great. She wasn't the problem.
Sorry, who is that actress?
Hold on.
Oh shit! Sorry, I
Well,
just
while you're-
activated. I
while
just
you're
activated
looking up-
Siri somehow.
The memory she shared, that was very touching. Like all
Yes.
of the things aside.
Mia Kirshner.
Mia. Okay, so yeah, Spock's mom actress.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't realize that.
Yeah,
I think I've always liked her. You know,
yeah.
since like a teenager, I had a crush on her. I think she's a great actress, and I like her in this show.
Yeah, and so shout out to her. Like, she did
Yeah.
great. She was fine. She wasn't the problem.
No,
I did like the
definitely not.
scene where he stood up for his mom, but I also feel like he did that in the Abrams movies, but whatever. So and I don't know. We saw a lot of that whole thing in the whole Burnham relationship, but whatever. But I do yes, that episode is not good. I still think it's better than Tomorrow and Tomorrow, but at least, yeah. And
I would disagree.
Oh, I don't know. All right, so Lost in Translation is the Uhura-centric episode with where they're hearing the strange sounds, and they have the Farragut and Kirk's there. So we get a lot of Kirk and Uhura friendship building. And I watched this one again last night and liked it better the second time.
I loved it.
Yeah, I think this is a very good Star Trek episode. This is just a good Star Trek episode. The Pelia Una thing is a little weird. They've been on the Enterprise all these weeks, and they're having this argument now.
Right.
I think this does a lot to deepen Uhura's situation. We got the first Starfleet do-rag, which was really awesome for one of my coworkers. Really excited about this.
Awesome.
As a Black woman Star Trek fan, she was very excited about the do-rag and talked to me about it at work. That it had the Delta on it, and she was like, "Why
cool. It
can't
was
I buy
cool.
this?
Yeah.
Why can
I
I
thought,
not
that's
buy
pretty
this?"
dope.
And I thought this is where Paul Wesley started to win me over with Kirk. Although the scene with Kirk and Sam Kirk, and I know Sarah and I complained about this online already, was one of the worst dialogue scenes ever. And that is an example of first draft.
The brother rivalry
I'm
thing.
jealous of
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I
I'm
couldn't
saying all my
couldn't
feelings out
believe
loud.
they
Okay.
they went there so baldly. Just like, I am upset because father approves of you because you are a higher advancing officer than me, but I am on the Enterprise.
There is no
Just
way
bullshit.
if I was working on a script to send to Issa as a rough draft, there is no way I would have let that dialogue sit on
See,
a
and as a rough
draft.
draft, I would have totally written it like that, sent it to you, and told you it's a rough draft, and you would have gotten mad at me.
That dialogue was so bad and so poorly acted, I just couldn't believe it. And yes, that they kind of make up for it later on, where the scene where Sam Kirk apologizes and he's waiting for Jim Kirk to apologize, and he's like, "What?" I did like that scene. I thought that scene was great.
I did too.
And
I really feel like I feel like Strange New Worlds has more exposition than any of the other Star Treks, even the 80s Star Trek, even TNG. And TNG had a ton of exposition because they need to advance the story, and they're just like, and the thing is, I can forgive exposition for advancing the plot. I cannot forgive exposition for character stuff. I cannot forgive characters speaking how they're feeling outright. And I'm just like, in ways that people don't talk, and certainly ways that Starfleet officers, whether they were brothers or not, would not have spoken to each other on that ship. But I ultimately, like, this episode also, I felt like had a great deal of potential, but there was I still threw my slippers because there is absolutely no way that Pike would have allowed Uhura to keep roaming about the ship, doing shit. She said, "Oh, lock me in my quarters." And he's like, "Nah, psh. I mean, sure, a guy who also has these symptoms almost just blew up the Enterprise, but we trust you. It's fine." She would have insisted on it. Both of them would have insisted on it. And if, frankly, even the idea of putting them in her quarters, that would have been fine. But honestly, if we're being serious, what I honestly think Pike would have done is put her in containment in sickbay so that they could keep an eye on her, because they would have been freaked the fuck out about what was going on with that. They would have been very worried. It would be different if all those scenes happened before they found out that this other guy has those symptoms and almost blew up the ship. That's fine. But it happened before those scenes. And then Kirk,
you could have still
Kirk was like, "Oh, you don't have to, like," she was starting to feel unwell or whatever, and he's like, "Oh, you go ahead." And she's like, "I'm," something like, "I'm not sure if I should be alone." He would absolutely have walked her to wherever she was going. He would not have left her alone in that state to wander the ship. So stuff like that just really takes me out of it for me, and it just, because otherwise I think the episode was great.
Two things that I do like, that it made canon that Kirk is a cookie guy. I'm a cookie guy. I like cookies. And I loved her saying, "Enough with the damn cookie here. I don't want the." I thought that was great.
Yeah.
So I just had to put that out there. And with the idea that Star Trek repeats themes, and I'm okay with the fact that they repeat themselves and recycle stories a little bit, this is the exact same story as Discovery Season 4. Pretty much.
Right.
Wait, which one was that? Was that the 10A or whatever they were called?
The species that was like mining the thing, and that it was just the reverse.
Discovery did it well, and Discovery spent an entire season on it. Part of the issue with Strange New Worlds is that, they'll build up to something, like the way that they build up the thing with Una being arrested and everything, and then they spend one episode resolving it, and then it's done. And like, I feel like that's such a waste, because you can still do episodic Trek and still have threads repeated that deal with stuff. You don't have to, because like they tease it and tease it and tease it, and then all of a sudden they have one episode where they introduce the main meat of the story, the climax, and the denouement all in one, and then they're done with it. And
you get
whiplash as an audience.
The pendulum swinging from people complaining that Discovery was too threaded and not episodic enough, and then everyone was like, "We don't like this," and so they swung back the other way too far.
Too far. Come on, you can still you know, you can still have repeating stuff going on and build up a story. Like, how cool would it have been if we had had an entire episode about Una and the lawyer's relationship, right? They could have flashbacks to her childhood and all of that stuff, get all of Una's backstory in one episode, which still would have been shoving a lot in, right? And then a couple episodes later, we have that court scene. And how much better would that have been?
Yeah.
Well, I kind of appreciate the court scene for sort of revealing what it was that stopped them from being friends, right? And it was Una could pass as human, right? That was the thing. So her family lived in the human city, right? Am I making that up, or is that right?
No, that's right. That's what
Yeah. So you know, and that was sort of just her apologizing to her friend. And I get the detraction in some of that, like the Kirk brothers scene is just completely cringeworthy. I love the guy that plays Sam Kirk. I think he's fantastic. I think he's like electric on screen. It's like he draws your attention. There's something about him. I like him a lot. Even the musical episode. Yeah.
TOS.
But
I love that they're playing up the mustache, because all they did in the TOS episode was put a mustache on William Shatner. And so they really going hard on the mustache.
But
because that's all we know about Stan Kirk before that. He had the fucking mustache.
I love the Kirk Uhura thing, and also just period Uhura. I love her in this series. I think this is a great season for her. For me, other than 2, this was like the first episode this season that jumped up and was like, "Hey, we're pretty good." And I was like, "Okay, yeah, this is good Trek. I like this."
I'm right there with you. This was that where I was like, "Oh man, this is great."
This was the one where I was like, "Yeah, okay, cool." And I think a lot of that had to do with Uhura. I don't, I'm so bad with names that I don't know.
Celia Gooding, is that her name?
Is that her name?
She's really young too. She's like 23.
Yeah, she already has a Grammy.
Blows my mind.
Oh, here it is. Yeah.
Absolutely blows my mind.
She won a Grammy for something. Celia Rose Gooding.
Oh, really? Grammy. Interesting.
Let me see.
Well, maybe
Broadway made her Broadway debut.
I was going to say
rose to prominence in the role of Frankie Healy in the rock musical Jagged Little Pill.
Wow. Okay. Interesting. Yeah, would not have guessed that. But also, hey, I guess she's one of the ones that was singing, right? They weren't all singing, right? They weren't all singing.
They were all singing for sure.
Were they all singing?
Yeah, did you hear the
some of them
auto-tune?
Well, you could tell Babs, who plays Mabenga, can't sing at all.
He says it. He says it in the episode.
I thought he was fine. I don't want to get ahead of things, but the only person who could not sing and they did not do it well was Spock.
That's like the only song I like. That first song.
Great.
We're jumping ahead.
We're jumping ahead. We cannot skip those old scientists.
Yeah.
So we got to talk.
No. Yeah.
So, listen, of all
one last thing on Lost in Translation. This was the second of 3. There's a strange signal interfering with our brain, like strange.
Right. In this season, out of 10.
Yeah, out of 10 episodes. So that was kind of funny. But I really liked it. I liked this. This was the first part where they brought in the horror element, and I thought it was really good. And we just have to shout out to Hemmer, who was such a great part of the first season. It was nice to see him remembered or brought up again. That was cool.
Even though it was corny as hell when they had smiling Hemmer what was
waving as he disappears. He didn't actually wave.
Okay.
Yeah, Force Ghost. Yeah.
Why not?
You might as well have gone like this and pointed at it. It was super cheesy, but I liked it because I like Hemmer. So
yeah, same here.
So those old scientists, directed by Jonathan Frakes, directed the hell out of this episode.
Yeah.
This is the one that felt to me like there's a lot of rough draft feeling to a lot of the scripts in this season. And that's one of the things, the first season I thought was so tight. And this second season, I feel like there's a lot of rushed scripts, but those old scientists was perfect.
Super tight.
You guys know I'm not a huge Lower Decks fan because the fast talking and the animated feel of it, I have a hard time with. However, and I do love that they said everybody talks so slow here.
Yeah,
Hilarious.
fantastic.
There are so many moments in this episode just worked on every level. The fact that they released it early as a thing for Comic-Con, and I'm like, hey, wait, it's a Saturday, and I get
Right.
So there was all kinds of fun things with that. I think they nailed Boimler doing the Boimler walk.
That walk, oh my god, I howled just to see his hips swinging back.
That was great.
Howled.
Probably my biggest laugh was when they were on the bridge and Pike says, "I need ideas," and Boimler's starts to talk. He's like, "Not you, not you." It was great. I thought Anson Mount was amazing in this episode.
Yeah,
just with
great
subtle
Pike
reactions.
Great Pike episode.
Yeah, his whole scene where he's like, "I already know my future." I love the meme that was out there that was like, even the beep beep chair.
Right.
Especially the beep chair. That was great. I think Anson Mount just killed it in this episode. Jack Quaid and Tawny Newsome were great.
Yeah, so good.
And I loved that the shout outs to the NXO1
the Enterprise. Yeah,
I love Ortega saying Travis Mayweather, he was the first pilot, and we sound like them now. I'd feel the same way if I was on Archer's Enterprise.
Mm-hmm.
And by the way, this High Country, the Pike novel I'm listening to, is a sequel to an Enterprise episode. And so there's a lot of Pike looking up to Archer stuff in that book.
Mm-hmm.
But
I just realized my power cord is not plugged in. No problem. Sorry for the.
But okay, so let's go around on this one. Starting with Sarah, your overall feelings of this old scientist. I think we need to make sure we get everyone's full thoughts on this, because it's my favorite
episode of the season. If it hadn't been for this episode,
yeah.
I think I probably would have, been just angrily writing an essay about how Star Trek is starting to go downhill. I really loved it. I loved everything about it. I have zero complaints. and it's funny because we're joking about how this episode seemed so tight, and yet so many of those moments were, people doing improv. Like Tawny Newsome is hilarious, and so they kept, some of the best moments.
And the amazing Spock joke. That's how you use Spock as in comedy. It's very interesting because she usually does not listen. That is, I howled again. Just perfect Spock comedy line.
Yeah, it was so good. I have zero
Spock in the lab blowing up the thing,
fun, super fun.
For longtime listeners of this podcast, or watchers, I guess, viewers, I just want to say that I feel completely vindicated, because I said from the beginning that Lower Decks would have been much better as a live action series.
You did.
See in this episode that clearly it would have been much better as a live action series.
It works.
I think it just would have been a million times better. And this episode was great. It was my second favorite episode of the series, of the season, after the finale. But
it's hard to argue with that, because I think we all have generational issues. Our old Gen X brains have a very hard time dealing with the speed of the cartoon, and I love it, but I don't love the fact that I miss every other line because it's just happening so rapidly that it hurts my brain.
See, I don't mind the speed of it. I've said this before.
The live action would fix that, is the thing.
It does. First of all, they did slow down. It is slower than Lower Decks, but also they played with that. One of my favorite jokes in the whole thing is when he's looking at M'Benga's tricorder, and he's like, "Oh yeah, this they never got any better than this, except for the exploding." And M'Benga looks up like, "Exploding?" What?
Their references are oddly specific.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Fuck. Fantastic.
But no,
so
I don't
good.
like the speed of Lower Decks. I don't like that cartoonness just lets them do stupid stuff that would be better if it was live action. So you get the benefit of the actors, which is a nice touch. But
yeah.
Anyway, whatever. I just feel vindicated. I just want to say, told you so. And we can
really
Quaid
and
his hair as Pike for Halloween.
Right.
great.
Right. And drawing in the jawline, hours drawing in the jawline. Great line. Great line. Quaid and Newsom were amazing in this episode. Just amazing. I thought they were breaths of fresh air. It's the ultimate fan service episode because we're watching the fans interact with these people in a way, you know, and the idea that Boimler has knowledge about them that they don't, because we're on episode 7 of season 2 and he's seen everything basically. It's just a fantastic hour of television that this for me is the best episode of the series.
Yeah.
Ooh, I wouldn't go that far, but
yeah, it knocked me out.
I think the
Episode
reason why
4
it
of
worked
season
is
1.
because it's, I feel like Strange New Worlds is sillier and fluffier. And so one of the reasons I feel like it worked is that, Lower Decks obviously is going to be the fluffiest, and Strange New Worlds is a little bit above that. And so it was a nice marriage. It worked really well.
Yeah.
I'm surprised you guys didn't complain about like Spock laughing and all the out of character Spock stuff from this episode.
Well, in this episode, it's just a byproduct of it having been happening for a couple episodes, right? And it's an interesting way for me anyway. I don't. Again, I think I shouted it in an earlier when we were talking about an earlier episode. I don't mind Spock laughing as an example of Spock being different. I think the charades episode is several bridges too far, but I love the idea of Spock laughing and then Boimler being like, what the fuck? Exactly. What did I do? Right? Like that is not right. He shouldn't be doing that.
He broke the timeline.
Yeah, exactly.
Smiling.
Again, the fan service, right? The fan service. Because we're all like, why is Spock laughing? Why is Spock, singing? Why is Spock yelling someone that they shouldn't die? Or, like it's sort of like us looking at it being like, well, that's not what Spock would do, but also through like a concerned in-universe kind of feel. And I thought it was handled masterfully.
Yeah, and then the whole thing of like how they're lying so they can work with Uhura and Spock and and all that.
And the specific heroes, that's what I like too. I like, Pike is like the ultimate, right? Like the ultimate lionized hero to them. Like, I don't know, governmentally, right? He's like the explorer hero, him and Archer. But also I love that they're so geeky about Uhura. And I mean, Spock must just be like an ever-present conversation, for Starfleet people. But also, don't ruin the future for anybody. And he's like, okay, I won't. Worf's honor. Ah, damn it. Like
right.
It's fun.
Well, and I think that by making it a more like, first of all, like by making it a more important thing that he mentions to Christine, like he's going to go on and do really, really, really important things.
Right.
And it adds an interesting thing to their character situation because, Christine forever going forward, Chapel is going to think like, am I going to fuck up this dude's like important things that he's got to do?
Right.
It was my least favorite part of the perfect episode. I don't like anything that they've done with Christine and Spock, Chapel and Spock. It's such a missed opportunity, and they sped up their relationship like crazy.
Yeah.
They were together for like one episode, and then all of a sudden they're having problems. And of course, their problems aren't shown; they're told. We just are told that they're having problems, and we're told that all of these things. They don't show us anything, and it's sad because they started out with so much chemistry, and in the end, they ended up showing more between T'Pring and Spock than they showed between Chapel and Spock, and it's just a disaster. Their whole relationship, and it has so much potential.
A quick thought experiment: if you imagine suddenly a time traveler from the future has jumped into the Zoom call, and they're super excited to meet David, and they're super excited to meet Daz, and they're super excited to meet Sarah. and they don't mention me at all. I'm gonna be like, what the hell? You know, like I thought that was really funny. Like Lon should be really worried that she's about to die.
Yeah, no shit. But also the like the in episode worry of Una, right?
Yeah,
Like she's like, what, like she thinks that she has some grisly fate, but really he's just like horned up because the woman who is the ideal of Starfleet to him and
Which
is
set up
literally
the
in his
hilarious
bunk.
in joke of Ransom walking by, voiced by Jerry O'Connell, and saying the hottest first officer
Right.
in history.
His wife.
Like,
His wife.
Yeah.
Yeah.
it's pretty funny.
Yeah, good stuff.
Yeah, and a good in joke. So,
I
all
didn't
right.
get
So,
that.
any last thoughts on the Lower Decks crossover? Because we got 3 more to go.
I was super concerned going in.
Yeah, I was nervous. Yeah,
I'm a very light fan of Lower Decks. I left it alone for a couple weeks and I was like, oh, I should finish Lower Decks. And I realized that I'd just forgotten that I'd finish it. So to me, Lower Decks is kind of like background entertainment. But in this episode, for me, it just made everything just come together so perfectly. I think probably it's easily, I think, the best script of this season. And just as far as how tight everything was and how much they got in, how many laughs there were, and yet still, like, okay, I mean, I'm kind of a softie. Like, I cried like 5 times in my life, and then I had kids, and now I'll cry at a commercial that comes up on YouTube while I'm angry for it to be over. I'm like, oh fuck, oh, it got me, that kind of thing. But the whole, Mr. Boimler, live long and prosper. I was like, just like I felt what he would feel. And I was like, I got a little misty eyed of that. I loved it. I don't know.
Yeah, I have a friend that told me a story about how he was at a convention and he just happened to be in the back hallway and ran into Leonard Nimoy, and how when Leonard Nimoy like could tell that he was geeking out, and he said that Leonard Nimoy like gave him the salute and told him to live long and prosper, and he said he seriously started like crying in the moment. And so
Yeah.
like I thought of my friend telling me that story in that scene, and I'm right with you.
That's so cute.
Yeah,
Absolutely. Like, think
I
about
had a similar experience.
Yeah.
I met DeForest Kelley at a Star Trek convention when I was a little kid. My mom and I were at a Star Trek convention in Indianapolis. She only took me because it was me, and I was like in 4th grade, and we were in an elevator with DeForest Kelley, and he was super great. Like,
cool.
This was before you took photos all the time, or you had a
Right.
camera on you, but he gave me a hug. And so I got a DeForest Kelley hug. So I got a Bones hug. So
A Bones hug.
as like a 5th grader.
Were you like, can you push 5th floor, please? And he was like, I'm a doctor, not an elevator operator.
How perfect would that be?
That would have been, but no, he didn't. So no, he just I just told him that Wrath of Khan was my favorite movie, but that Search for Spock was the most recent movie.
Mhm.
And I said that I just told him that he was really funny in the movie, and then he thanked me and gave me
Cool.
a hug. Because I was a little kid,
That's cool, man.
Yeah. Now I can't believe I have never told that story before, because that is, I met DeForest Kelley. Yeah, it was cool.
Yeah. And I bet we're going to meet the new Bones in season 3.
Yeah, I bet that's coming. Yeah.
Probably. We'll get to Scotty. Okay, so anything else on those old scientists? The name was hilarious.
Yeah.
Why do they
TOS.
call it TOS there?
Yeah, that was a good.
Personally, I'm gonna steal that title. I'm gonna do, like, for my Patreon page. I'm just about to start my rewatch of the original series, so I'm just gonna call the Patreon exclusive podcast "Those Old Scientists" and just go for it.
There you go. Well, hey, if you ever need a guest on there,
hell yeah.
Yeah. I don't need to rewatch the original series.
Perfect. Perfect.
So Under the Cloak of War. So we had the whiplash, the back and forth of the. I love this episode. I thought it was on par with In Pale Moonlight, DS9. It got dark as fuck. I thought the guy playing the Klingon general was amazing. I thought
He's like the big bad in Barry this last season.
Yeah. Well, and the fact it was really interesting watching the members of the crew, like Uhura, like thinking he was like cool and like
Right.
respecting him and that whole thing. And so the twist that he was the liar, I thought that was an incredible twist. It was well set up.
Yeah.
And one I did not see coming. I thought all the Klingon War stuff with the the fact that when you go back and watch that they talk about I served on Jagal and that they were obviously planting the seeds for that. I thought Ortegas was great in the episode because she had the rough role of playing the war hero who still has like rough feelings towards Klingons, and she got to speak Klingon in the episode, so I thought that was really good on her part. And I just thought this episode was really, really, really good. Outside of the Romulan ale thing, which I'll get over. I'm already over it, but and having Clint Howard in there since Corbomite Maneuver he was in Corbomite Maneuver, which was the 10th episode aired, but it was the first episode filmed of so all right, so we're running out of time here with Sarah, so
imagine our time for the musical.
We'll get to the musical really quickly. Do we have anything? Does anybody? I don't want to short shift this episode, but I also don't think
this episode was fantastic. I almost feel that the execution would have benefited greatly from being a more spread out story. Like if you just pitch the plot where it's like the doctor was actually the one who did this, and then this Klingon has been saying that he killed his own men and now he wants peace, and like they're gonna that setup was incredible, but it was all very rushed, and I feel like it almost could have been like, I mean, that's like a movie level plot, not a TV episode level plot. So but it was fantastic. I really.
And there's a great Spock moment where he brings up the art of war, where he's being awkward teenage Spock, like not knowing, like thinking he's doing the right thing to help Christine. That was great. I love everybody has to go check out Ortegas when she leaves the dinner. That was very funny. Like Una has good moments in that episode where she's like trying to keep a handle on everything. She's like basically like Captain Pike, like, will you do something?
Right.
I thought that was great.
And that spoke to a problem I kind of have with this whole season, is that Captain Pike is not very captain-like. I did not mean for that to rhyme.
No, I don't think he's as strong as he was in Discovery season 2 or
season 1 even. Yeah.
And by the way,
although
season 2 is one of my favorite seasons of Modern Trek. So
it's great. I love it too. I'm with you on that. But I have to say, even though Pike has not been my cup of tea this season, maybe my favorite scene of the entire season is the late episode one with him and M'Benga, as M'Benga is explaining. But again, I think I like that so much because it's M'Benga, and he's like, he started the fight, but I'm glad he did. Just fantastic.
And we can kind of come back to this one if we have to, if we lose Sarah, but I don't want to lose a chance to get Sarah's thoughts on Subspace Rhapsody. I was dreading this episode. I thought it was a terrible idea. I still think it should have been left on the writer's room floor and maybe come back to later with another rewrite. However, was not.
Are you talking about Under the Cloak of War?
No, I'm talking about Subspace Rhapsody.
Oh, okay. We've moved. I'm like, what?
No.
Whew. Okay, sorry. I didn't catch on that we moved.
Subspace Rhapsody is one that I have very mixed feelings on. I love the fact that it pissed off the toxic fans.
Sure, absolutely.
I enjoyed that. It wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be, but it was still bad.
It was still bad.
Still not.
Yeah, I think they spent all the time making sure that the music wasn't bad. Like, to be fair, like, top notch in terms of if you're gonna have one episode and you're gonna hire a guy who just does musicals, that's great. Because
Mhm.
I was kind of expecting the music to be worse than it was.
That was.
can't
I
remember
feel like
what
that was the
the-
biggest. That was the biggest problem for me. The music wasn't very good.
I
Really?
felt like they
Okay.
said that
all
there
the
was a
time
musical
on the
episode.
music and none of the time on the writing, because of course the writing wasn't good. The music was fine, the writing was terrible, and the character development was rushed and terrible. The stuff, of course, between
Well, and it
Buck
barely
and
glances.
Chapel, painful, and not in a good way.
That's my problem with musicals. Like this, you get nothing for the story. So it's like, the Lon Noonien Singh with like going into her after seeing Una with Kirk, goes into her quarters and picks up the watch. That's a 15-second scene in a Star Trek episode that could give so much emotion, even without dialogue. She walks in, she opens the locked case from her mission she can't talk about, and she looks at the watch and she pines for him. That is absolutely cool. I don't need a 3-minute song. I don't need
I
a
was ready to
3-minute
pull
song.
my eyeballs out in that
Yeah,
song.
it
And
was
look, she
fucking
performed it.
hard to get through. She was great. She was great. Everyone was great, but I just thought, this is like a third of an episode for me.
I have been excited to talk about this because I just want to talk about myself a little bit for a minute here. So, my background, I was a musician before I became a computer nerd professionally, and I was I had my success as a punk musician, but the only reason I wasn't more into musical type music is because I cannot sing, which is very unfortunate. It changed the whole course of my life. But anyway, my high school crew were a lot of musical theater people. We used to watch Star Trek. I used to watch Star Trek with the musical theater people, and I'm very familiar with musicals. I like musicals a lot. My favorite TV show is Buffy the Vampire Slayer. It's my all-time favorite TV show. There's only one show that's ever done a really good musical episode.
It's that one. Yeah.
The reason it is so good is, first of all, they were 6 seasons into the show. The songs are all very memorable and character specific, and major plot points happened with the music and the songs. And it was just perfect. Every other show that's tried has had, countless shows have done musical episodes and they're never good.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're not terrible, but they're never really good. Because they're usually like this one was, they just shove some songs into an episode and it doesn't really have anything to do with anything. Subspace Rhapsody referenced Buffy a bunch of times, which was really kind of cool. Obviously, that made me smile. But they copied it in a lot of ways, but it was like it was a very pale reflection, and I can go into a lot of detail on why I thought so. But the songs were very generic. They weren't like, you have to listen to songs a few times. I listened to a couple of songs twice just to get a better feel for them or whatever. Really, there is 10 seconds of Genius, which is the Klingon K-pop song. That is one of the best things that's ever happened. Kling pop. K-pop, Klingon pop, of course.
Yeah. See, I was hoping for some Klingon opera personally, or like death metal. That would have been nice too.
But I mean, that 10 seconds is like hilarious, and the song is catchy, and it's like it all works perfectly with the characters, like the dancing with the like that is what the whole episode should have been like, and the rest of it was like, you didn't really have anything specific to the characters, like we don't know the characters well enough in a lot of ways to know what kind of song they would sing or whatever, but they all sang like kind of Disney movie level animated movie songs, very generic. Not
well, and I thought the status report one, the first one, was funny, and I thought it was in canon, and or like made sense in the universe that they're like, why am I singing, like that whole thing.
Yeah.
And then but once they got into the big numbers, and like I thought there were too many, like the Spock one was funny, but it didn't need to be there, and then the Christina Chong one was way too long.
Yeah.
And I know they were trying to take advantage of the fact that she's a singer, and whatever.
The grand finale song was the best song, I thought, of all the songs, but it was very long.
Yeah. Sarah, I know you got to go. So do you have any other deeper thoughts on the rest of the season even?
Honestly, it's just, I think the season finale was wonderful. I think it was really, really wonderful. And again, it's like, oh, the writers are back after taking off episodes, where I'm just like, it's so weird. But, and I guess that makes sense because TOS is like that, because multiple, completely different writers per episodes. TNG was like that. But I just the Spock Chapel thing is so disappointing. I don't think I've been as unhappy with a romantic pairing that I was really previously excited for. I can't even think of another example, because they had all this perfect chemistry between Ethan Peck and Jess Bush, and they wasted it in the most spectacular fashion. They immediately turned into a bickering old couple an episode after they got together for no reason. It wasn't explained. It wasn't shown. It was just sort of, oh, now we're fighting. Guess what? And she desperately wants to get off the Enterprise, apparently. She keeps applying for random internships that creates drama. It's totally out of character for Spock to be worried about a 3-month absence. A 3-month absence to a Vulcan is nothing.
Yeah, it's a week.
Nothing. Okay.
Yeah, especially since he's already been in this long distance relationship this whole time. So
of course, yeah. See, and to take that relationship that they've been building to use, to use this episode to put a pin in it, it's like we're going to put a pin in this whole relationship during this music, as a result of this musical number, because we know we're going to pick up with it in season 3. So we want that sexual tension or whatever to carry through. But it's like, come on, guys, like you've handled this relationship pretty much in a bullshit manner the entire season.
Yeah, I wasn't. Yeah, I'm not a fan of how they resolved that, but yeah. So I know we're gonna lose Sarah in a minute, but back to the Subspace Rhapsody a little bit. I thought they kind of came up with a decent explanation for. I kind of didn't like it spreading everywhere. Like, although I loved the scene where Pike's singing to Patel in front of everybody. I thought
right.
that was great.
Cute. That was really cute.
A private conversation. That song's called, right? Yeah.
That totally fell flat because it was so. Again, I don't mean to over Buffy this conversation, but the equivalent song in Buffy is like Xander and Anya are getting married, and their song reveals all their fears about marrying each other that they've never revealed to each other before. And then, leads to them both deciding, oh my God, this is horrible. People are going to start killing each other. We need to stop this. Which was all echoed in the Stranger Worlds musical episode. Like all the themes were echoed of that. But that was like two characters well, and the big thing actually happened between them. This was like, I don't want to go there on vacation. Like it was so forced that I just wasn't impressed with that. Their whole relationship seemed very rushed, and the two captains seemed just. The whole season seemed very rushed. If I had to complain about one thing, it just was very rushed.
And it may be that they were trying to rush to get it into production before the writer's strike. So, sure. I know they were filming while season 1 was being aired. Like that's when they were filming. So, and I do know that they supposedly have season 3 already written. And that's the word, although
the rough draft of season 3 that they're just going to use.
Just go with it.
Sarah strikes one more time.
With
that, I gotta go. I'll see y'all next time.
Take care,
Sarah, thank you for joining us.
Bye, Sarah.
See you again next time. Yeah. So, and that's the thing is season 1, I felt like I couldn't do that. Right, most of it,
right.
Like I was impressed by the writing, and then season 2, I'm like, they need to fix this and they need to fix that. And as much as I did like the finale, there is one huge fuck up in the finale that needed to be fixed, and it could have been fixed with a fucking line of dialogue. And because when I first started talking about what this online, people were like, well, they probably didn't do it because it was too expensive. We'll get there. But any last thoughts on the musical episode? It wasn't as, for me, it wasn't as bad as, there's two things. One, it wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. Two, don't ever do that again. Three,
Accent on two. Yeah.
yeah, don't ever do that again. And three, like, it wouldn't have bothered me at all in a 22 episode season.
Again. Yeah. Again.
So
yeah.
My final take on the musical episode is it was mostly upsetting because they could have done it much better, and it was too soon to do it in the course of like a series. You can't make your 19th episode of a show a musical episode. That's just too soon.
Yeah.
You need,
yeah, but this is the 800th episode of Star Trek, and they're doing
fair enough.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
I feel like they could have personalized it more. Like, really, anyone could have sung any of the songs, and it wouldn't have really changed much. And that's that. So
I love that Spock was the first one to sing too.
Yeah,
I thought that was great.
I liked Spock's song too. I just kind of wished like there was no like tonal or melodic pullback to like Star Trek themes. Like, why not?
Well, the intro of the show,
you know, like the intro was a little different. Yeah.
But no, the Spock stuff, the auto tune level was so painful that it was like, it sounded like that Cher song, you know, like,
it sounded like a regular radio pop song,
but like of someone who could not sing. Like,
right, of course.
One of the nice things about the Buffy musical was that the idea was, you know, very similar to this. There's some magical thing that happens that makes everyone sing, you know, demon, subspace, whatever. The actors who couldn't sing well just sang, and it was super cool. You know? Just taking
a note. Subspace demons.
You just listen to the song and you just hear them moving his pitch around, and it's just like, crazy.
Yeah, and you know, on the Ready Room, Christina Chong admitted that she was the one super pushing for the musical episode because she and Celia Gooding, like, you know, they're like, we have musical people, but I guess like originally, like the thought was that they were going to be in some situation alone, and they were like, well, we can't do it if we don't do the whole crew,
right?
And give everybody like a chance, and you know, for me, it's just there are too many comedy episodes in this season, and that it felt way more like a problem when you're watching week to week. If you're watching the whole season, it's less of a big thing. But like when you like, and like I said, like, and if you're gonna take any of these comedy episodes out, you take charades out. That's the worst one. And then,
for sure.
So if episode 5, so then if it would have been episode 1 through to 7, and then you have a comedy episode, and then every other episode's a comedy episode, fine. But like, it's just in a 10 episode season, it's a lot. Hurt more when you're watching week to week, because then you're waiting a whole week and you're like, I just got a fucking another comedy.
I feel like it would have been nice to have, you know, take out charades and maybe one other episode and add in 2 more Gorn episodes. That might have been nice, you know, like
build the thread a little bit. Yeah.
Like they had the one thing at the beginning. I think it was the first episode where they
teased the Gorn in the first.
They teased the Gorn in the first episode, and then they're never mentioned
again the Admiral, right?
Yeah,
like, they don't know what's coming or whatever. Yeah, right.
So if we're rewriting the season, I'm taking out Tomorrow and charades, and I'm replacing those both with Gorn episodes.
Yeah, that's fair.
And then
I feel like Kirk in Toronto.
Yeah. Yeah. We're taking away Toronto, and we're doing like, what I'd really like to see is, this is the frontier era. That's what Boimler says, you know, this is the, and so like, show us more colonies, they talk about like, we got to bring grain to this colony or whatever, but show us the colonies, show us the struggles, show us like the Federation flagship having to show up to a colony where, you know, the food crop has failed and the people are like threatening to kill each other, and like build a whole episode out of that, you know?
Yeah.
That's what I
mean, that's sort of the TNG sort of playbook, and it worked. You know,
And you had 20 episodes.
Yeah,
if
yeah,
you wanna
exactly.
do
But
a
we
Bourne
got
episode-
we got good glimpses of those colonies, those cultures and stuff like that. And I feel like we're not really getting that a lot in this show, which again, it's not like the focus.
Yeah.
But yeah, a little bit more building the threat of the Gorn would have been good, because we got very little in the first season, and also, I mean, very little in the second season, considering we have a whole cliffhanger, you know,
Yeah.
So
that we're
what
waiting a year
talking
for.
about doing is rewriting the season, and we're talking about taking episodes 3 and 5 and turning them into Gorn episodes. So what you
Yeah.
do is you take episode 3 and you make it about a colony world where the people are freaking out about the Gorn coming, and there's no Gorn in the episode. There's just like, we have to go and help these people get out of the chaos of the fear
Right.
of this thing. And then episode
Yeah.
5, you
Build the
find-
threat.
yeah, you find like a ship that's like where everyone on the ship, you find a ship floating in space and everybody's impregnated with Gorn on the ship, and then
Right.
it becomes the moral dilemma episode of like where they get orders to just blow up the ship, and then people are like, fuck, I don't want to do that.
Right.
There's your episode
Or
5. So
or
you don't even see the Gorn in the 2 episodes.
right.
You pitch it.
Also, the Gorn are just velociraptors at this point. So
Right.
Well,
right.
there's the word the in canon explanation for that is that there's 2 subspecies of Gorn.
Okay.
is
Flea
what-
Stack and Velociraptor.
Yeah,
Sleeve stack.
yeah, and
Yeah.
well, and like there's one that talks really slowly into the translator.
I'm just I was immediately just reminded at like after the Hemmer conversation that in Enterprise the Aenar people are like a myth to the Andorians. So between Enterprise and Strange New Worlds, we've got an Aenar ascending to, I mean, he was a chief engineer on Federation.
No, they show
Star
the
Trek.
Enar in Enterprise, don't they? Like, you watched it more recently than me.
No,
but-
they do, but they were, up until they show them, they were a myth,
Oh yeah.
right? Because Shran's like, yeah, we've only just sort of heard
Well,
about
and
them in
apparently
folktales
Enar
or whatever.
existentialism is a big thing because Uhura asks the
Yeah.
Klingon general about it. So
So there's a lot of knowledge about this subculture of Andorians that have come across in a very short period of time. What are we, 50, 70? Wait.
how about that nerdy pullback?
Yeah, it was pretty good.
All right, so imagine I'm gonna fuck up Hemigi.
Hegemony.
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 I can't say that word. Last episode.
I tried to correct you and I fucked it up.
So, outside of the colony being like a completely ridiculously transparent, like budgetary thing,
Yeah.
No, it's a
Like the
whole
American
society
Midwest.
based on small town Midwestern 21st century towns. Sure.
Right.
with Ontario names and the barber shop.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
like, so whatever. Anyways, I actually, now that they're doing Star Trek movies, like supposedly this is going to be one of the things that they're going to do one-off movies with. Partially, I think, just because that's all they could get Michelle Yeoh to do again.
Yeah. Well,
but-
I hope we get some. That's all. I need more Yo. I need more Empress Yo.
Yeah. Well, supposedly we're getting a movie of that. I would love to see a Cayuga adventure. Now we've seen the ship destroyed, but like,
Yeah, no
I
kidding.
would love to see Patel out there being a captain. So my biggest, okay, so this episode was great. There's a lot of like aliens, James Cameron love in this
Yeah.
one.
Oh yeah, we got the Gorn flying off into space and stuff. That was a
Yeah.
nice little alien.
I like
Yeah.
so my only problem with this episode, it's a glaring plot hole. It's enormous and it could have been solved with one line of dialogue. The fact that Chapel is the only survivor on the Cayuga is
Yeah,
dumb as hell.
Yeah.
that was kind of crazy.
and there's no way she's the only survivor. So
Take a
Spock
chance.
just
Well,
hurling the
Shh.
saucer section at the planet and not getting any other survivors off is fucked up.
Well, also she
Right.
knocked on the window when he flew by, which I thought
Yeah.
was really
right. Can't you hear me?
Well,
Oh wait.
thankfully, he didn't hear
Scream?
her. Well, she tried the light first.
She
Well,
tried to,
I'm
but then
okay
she
with
knocked
that.
on the window.
You know why I'm okay with that? Because when you're in a desperate situation, you
It's
do dumb
desperation.
shit.
Sure.
And I mean, seeing the hand move would have been good enough. But yeah, I also like, you know,
Yeah.
in space, no one can hear you scream or knock. But
Exactly.
you know,
So
yeah,
I could live
I
with
dug
that.
this too.
So how you fix this? The expensive way is that when Chapel and Spock beam back on, somebody and the bridge says, "We're beaming back 12 survivors from the Cayuga."
Yes.
And then they have a bunch of fucking fucked up, cut up red shirts like laying on the transporter pad.
Yeah.
That's the expensive way. The cheap way is somebody turns on the bridge and says, "Commander, I just beat 12 survivors on the Cayuga."
Totally.
Right.
Done.
Right.
That
But
was so silly.
so here's a complaint with that. If we're going to go deep on that. So Nurse Chapel wakes up amidst an entire group of strewn bodies, and she checks nobody's for life signs.
True.
She's
That is
the head.
also a problem.
She's the head nurse, and she doesn't check anybody around her for life signs. We're literally panning over just a myriad of dead / unconscious Federation, you know,
Yeah, that is a
Starship
problem,
employees.
too.
And then
But
we
I
get to
like how
her.
you can, I
Yeah.
like how you can just move those two wires to restore power to the ship.
Right.
Well,
It's
you
the
know,
the ultimate hot wire. The
cross-train
ultimate
heavily
hot
in
wire.
Starfleet. Yeah, that was my biggest problem. I loved Spock doing the EVA. I liked Spock arguing he's the only one with the skills to do it, which is bullshit.
Yeah, I didn't understand that part exactly. Like, why can only he do it?
Well, I mean, I could see saying like send the Vulcan to do this really intricate thing. Yes. You know, it's funny because they on one of the Easter egg shows they clipped in a scene where Kirk says to Spock, "When did you last do EV training?" And he's like, 2 weeks ago, Captain. Oh, it was an animated series. Yeah.
Okay.
Combat training. It was in the animated series. And he's like, as if he does it all the time.
Right.
And then, but also, you know, we've seen Spock do this before in the motion picture. So the motion picture that I defend all the time that nobody else likes, but I like. So,
I wanted to point out the Ortegas moment in this episode because I feel like people are talking about the other ones a lot more, but for me, this is the real one when everybody is trying to hold on to their breakfast. And she is ear to ear grinning as the thing is in a complete free fall. Yes, I mean, yeah, they did this for the ADHD people. Also, I have ADHD, but I don't need it completely hammered into me. But I think the line was sweet, but it was a little heavy handed. You know, you were born for this, Erica, or whatever he says. But still, it's like, yeah, look at her face in that scene. I'm like, that is this actress making this moment the ultimate ideal for her character because she is in her element entirely. And it was, again, almost without dialogue, really. It was just the smile and everybody else, you know, holding onto their seats and
I've seen
wide-eyeing
a lot
it.
of people complaining that Ortega's got short-shifted in this theater or in this season. But everyone should know that she was dealing with tragedy in her real life. Her husband died at like
shit
the season. Yeah.
Jeez.
And like so there wasn't a lot of Ortega's episodes, but she was having like real life shit going on. So that's why there wasn't an Ortega's episode this season. And everything that she did do, you got to give her a ton of credit for because I mean, she was talking about her husband. They interviewed her on the Ready Room and she was talking about her husband and it made me almost start crying because she was like talking about how the first season, you know, he was there with her every day when they were in lockdown doing the season, and like,
Huh.
so yeah.
I guess I got to listen to the Ready Room.
Yeah, Ready Room is actually pretty good. When you're watching week to week, they give you the teases for next week. It's like
Okay.
pretty crucial. But
I think
no,
we
the Ready
all
Room
agree.
has a little bit too much of Will Wheaton like gushing, like, "Hey, welcome to the Star Trek family. We're family now." A little bit too much of that, but
Right.
I think we all agreed that the cast did a fantastic job, like across the board, and I think all
100%.
complaints, minor or major, were about the writing.
Yeah.
and
Yeah, I think that's the definite outlook on this season.
And what are we
And
missing
maybe
here?
like
what have we not talked about with this finale? What is like one of the best fucking things about this finale?
the really fucking awesome tactical gear that they had. That was dope.
That was cool, but I'm not saying
I like that. I know you weren't, but I wanted to throw it out there.
Montgomery Scott.
Montgomery Scott. Yeah.
Done well. I thought he was awesome. He's more Scottish than James Doohan, who was
Canadian.
born near you, Des.
Yeah.
He wasn't born in Scotland. He was born in British Columbia.
Yeah.
And well, it is funny because I don't know if they're gonna CGI out the finger that Doohan lost in the war, but like,
right.
We'll see if they do that. But he was great as Scotty. I love that Pelia gave him the name Scotty.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
And
actually, and we haven't given much credit to her, to Carol Kane. She was absolutely great this season. I thought I love her character. I think she's funny. My favorite moment was actually in Subspace Rhapsody. It's a very tiny moment at the very end where Pike and her are doing a little dance. Like, it's not even the focus. It's like Spock or Uhura turns around to look at the bridge, and like Pike is, like the thread is over. Pike is walking back from saying something to her. Can't remember what it was. And then he's walking back to the chair, but he walks up to her, and they kind of do like a little.
I didn't notice
yeah, check it out again. They do like a little Spanish kind of dance with each other moment. I was like, that was really sort of like obviously improvised and kind of fun and sweet, and probably like after they thought maybe they were done shooting or whatever. I don't know. It was just fun. I liked it. I thought she was great.
Where Sam Kirk starts rocking out to the Klingon song.
yeah, that was great too.
Right. Right.
Yeah. But I thought the guy Barton Quinn, who plays Scotty, he's not been in a lot of stuff. And
okay.
I heard his name was Barton Quinn. It made me laugh because the guy who produced The Fugitive and The Invaders and the 60s Barton Quinn. So that's how my dumb brain just was like Barton Quinn. But anyways, he was great. I love that Scotty's already like a whiz kid, because first of all, you don't become Scotty if you're not a whiz kid.
Of course, yeah.
And the fact that he survived Gorn by like souping up the shuttle, you don't realize, you forget. I love in prologues when something happens and you forget about it, that we saw his shuttle, and that's one of ours. That was dialogue for people that we don't need them to say that's one of ours.
Right.
Could figure that out. But the fact that Scotty crashed in the prologue, we could see him. It was a good introduction for Scotty.
Yeah.
And it puts him on the Enterprise. I kind of wish they had showed him when he had all that stuff, which was obviously a play on the Trouble with Tribbles. Where he was carrying all the stuff. But I wish they had him walk into the engine room and just drop his jaw and say, "She's a beauty" or something.
She's a beauty, Captain. Yeah. So something like that would have been really nice. But we'll probably
really
get
great.
that next season.
I can't believe they didn't do that.
Yeah.
Like just to have him automatically fall in love with the engine room of the Enterprise.
Like he did on TNG, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm going to put out my prediction here. We are going to get 5 seasons of Strange New Worlds. We will meet Bones next season. We will meet either Sulu or Chekhov next, and then whichever one we don't meet,
and then the other one,
then we will go straight to TOS.
Yeah,
I wouldn't bet against that.
Walter Koenig dies. Did you see that tweet that he sent out?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah, holy shit.
Before I die.
See me before I die.
So the thing about Walter Koenig, I actually knew his son. Just like we weren't friends, but you know.
One that was on Growing Pains.
Yeah, Boner from Growing Pains,
Yeah.
Andrew. He was also he played
That's Walter Koenig's son.
Yeah, that's Walter
Yes.
Koenig's son,
I had
Boner
no
from
idea.
Growing Pains. Yeah, and he also played the Joker in that Batman Dead End fan film. It's like Batman and Alien versus Predator or some shit, and he's the Joker in that one. It's like a little 8-minute fan film. It's really fun, and he's a great Joker. And he was an incredible human being. But he was also a member of the.
I've heard that. Yeah.
Yeah, he really was a total sweetheart. The first time I met him, I was drunk and a complete asshole and was like, "Boner!" Like I was just an idiot. And he gave me the time out of his day, and then I saw him again, and we hung out, and it was very, very cool. And it was very, very sad to hear how he lost his life. But he was the producer on the Never Not Funny podcast, which is by comedian Jimmy Pardo, who is married to Danielle Koenig, who is Walter's daughter, and Andrew was, his brother-in-law. And they made a mention after his appearance on Picard, and they said that, his wife called and said, "You need to watch this because, your dad's on Star Trek again," right? So they did, and he said the whole family was there and they all watched it. And he said every single person had tears in their eyes, and if that's the way Walter gets to go out on his last Star Trek thing, then everyone's going to be happy with that. So
yeah, that was a great cameo.
It was cool.
Yeah. All right, so final thoughts on Strange New Worlds as an entire season.
I loved it. I think you
Issa?
guys complained way too much. It was exactly what it said. I would, if I could personally rewrite the way they do it, I would just draw everything out more, give it more episodes. And there's some nitpicks, but overall it's probably my favorite of the new Star Trek shows, if you're not including the Orville, which obviously people are not.
Right.
It's
really funny you say that, because that's my fix for this season is like going Orville season 3 with it. Like I think Under the Cloak of War would have been probably a lot better, even though it's one of my favorites of the season. Like if it had given 11-12 more minutes, it could be even better. Like I feel like the fluidity of that third season of the Orville added to the quality of that show so much, and I feel
They
like
were just like, I don't give a shit how long.
Fuck it, let's make a mini movie. Fuck it, and I like that a lot, and I know that the Strange New Worlds guys are ballsy with what they're doing for these episodes. I'd like them to be ballsy with runtime too.
Yeah. Des, have you heard my interview with Brandon about season 3 of Orville? Have you listened to that yet?
Yes, I have. That's actually, so here's the thing, that actually got me to watch it in the first place. I'd never watched the Orville, and so I immediately binged 3 seasons of that after that interview, and
I
loved it, and loved it, and multiple times I'm crying per season. It's just, and it's funny and it's smart, and I think I looked at him like, okay, well, it's a Star Trek spoof or whatever, so I never gave it a shot. But after watching it, it's just like really heartfelt, and I really connected to it. That's maybe this is a bad thing to say on this podcast, but it's one of my favorite tracks.
I'm right there with you.
Okay, good.
It's my favorite new track, and I get some blowback for that, but I love it.
All right, well, I will happily take that with you, my friend.
Well, my thing about this season is that I don't think it's as good as season 1. I think it's better on rewatch. I think if you'd gotten rid of episode 3 and 5 and replaced those with Gorn stories, and like I said, you don't have to show the Gorn, you could just show the fear of the Gorn coming. Actually, now that I think about it, I would love to see an episode where they find a whole ship of people impregnated with Gorn.
For sure.
And,
Although
I
do like
what you do with that.
Yeah, that's a great Star Trek idea, right? To save the galaxy, do we destroy the ship, right?
Yeah,
and all the lives on it. But
and maybe if it's like you do it as like well, like I mean, we could talk about this, but like one of the Strange New Worlds I would like to see is one that is all. I've also said that I would love to see them do like a Fury Road episode where the whole episode is somebody beams on the ship and there's a whole armada chasing after the Enterprise because of the person they just beamed on the ship, and the entire
That's a great
episode
idea.
is on the run. And
That's a great idea.
like, you know, just like nonstop action, but all the story has to get into like, you know, it's real time. They don't like leave the bridge or whatever. And like, you know, these are things I would like to see Strange New Worlds do. But at the same time, like for me, what I would like to see Star Trek do in general, beyond the fact that I want Star Trek Legacy with Captain Seven, like greenlit now. But beyond that, I would like to see non-Starfleet stories. And I say that all the time, but I just want to see the Star Trek world.
I love your Jake Sisko idea, because that's perfect.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, Jake Sisko.
Even though that's like the one character I didn't like on that show.
Well, but if you do like a whole spotlight type show where it's a Star Trek, a crew of reporters on a ship.
Right.
Like,
And he's not a
instead of
13-year-old
exploring,
anymore.
They're
Right? Yeah.
trekking around, investigating like stories, like and uncovering like they could be. Then Starfleet becomes the antagonist because they're exposing stories that Starfleet doesn't want people to hear. So that would be a really interesting. Roddenberry would fucking hate that.
Yeah.
But
how cool would it be to get the first interview with a crystalline entity?
yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, well, there's all kinds of things. If Jake Sisko's your Bob Woodward, like in space,
right?
You know, I don't know. I like it, but of course, you know, it is what it is. But Strange New Worlds, I think, is doing lots of great stuff, so I'm fine with
Definitely.
that. And I want Legacy, but the other thing, and I wish I'd mentioned this earlier instead of the part of the episode where only like the most hardcore people are still listening, but let's hear it for Star Trek actors for being fucking leaders in the strike. Hardcore. Not only is Michelle Hurd the vice president of SAG, which is fucking awesome and makes Rafi 10 times cooler, even though
yeah, totally.
Rafi's character.
Totally.
But the fact that I saw that Jerry Ryan is running for a union position. Oh,
I didn't know that.
In union leadership. Yeah. She's running in the next election of SAG to be, she's already a picket captain. She's the reason why the Star Trek actors have been constant. Even before SAG was on strike, the Star Trek actors were supporting the WGA strikers because Todd Stashwick, who, you know, was the Captain Shaw, and Jerry Ryan have been organizing the Star Trek actors to be at the picket lines. Like
just on an informational and strategic level for your own population, it's important to have people like not necessarily Star Trek people, but like people who have been recurring characters on Star Trek shows, for example, are great people to have, because they are someone who is going to be able to put how different the era is now as far as the money they get. Think about Jerry Ryan. I'm sure she raked in a shit ton of money when Voyager was on TV. And you got to think she's probably not getting as much from Picard, which, I mean, look, I can't speak on Voyager. I've seen like 10 episodes. Right. I've seen like 10 episodes of Voyager, and I don't think I liked any of them. That's my Star Trek hang up. Maybe at one point I will do a rewatch of that. I may
have to force the two of you to rewatch Voyager with me.
Okay, yeah, right. Issa's not a fan either, right?
Man, I'm breaking up. I think I'm going
through. We're losing him, Captain. We're losing him.
Well, I don't fall for that trick. No, Voyager, like all the Berman era shows, started rough, and you have to get to season.
I've seen a few random episodes throughout the whole series. I have definitely not.
I haven't sat down and watched the first 10 episodes, but it's the same. Like a friend of mine I had loved it, so if I was there when it was on, I'd watch it. And it never hit me, but maybe I'll give it a shot.
Hey, Janeway's from my hometown, so
and you know, I like, and hey,
and honestly, this is the first time it's taken you 2 hours and 45 minutes to mention that.
But I did love Star Trek Prodigy, and now I'm a huge fan of that. So
Prodigy's great.
great,
And
yeah.
did you guys see the preview for season 2? It's
Yeah,
Are they making
it disgusts me that there's a second season there that's done that doesn't have a home. Like,
yeah.
what
Are
the
they
hell?
not releasing it, or what? What's someone explain this to me? Is there not going to be a season 2?
Like, why is Paramount Plus not just putting it out? Because they own it, right?
Plus basically canceled it, even though they finished it. They finished season 2, but they canceled it.
Right.
It'll get released someday, I'm sure.
Yeah,
They'll go to
they'll find
Netflix
they'll
or
find a home
something, right?
because the Blu-ray sales have been through the roof for
Right.
Prodigy. So
And Netflix is now the home of Star Trek in Canada. Netflix Canada has all the TV Trek. So
there's
except for the new stuff.
Rumors that it's going to be released on Amazon, but
okay.
But it's stupid for Paramount to just. It's already done. Like, just have it.
That's
be with all
so
the other
wasteful.
Trek.
Like,
That
holy
was like
shit.
that was like the one Star Trek I got my younger daughter into. So I'd like
Cool.
to see.
Yeah.
Very
well,
cool.
we also got that extended preview from Disco season 5, which was really great. If you haven't seen that,
Looking forward to that.
It's just basically an action scene, but it's a really good Burnham action scene.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, look cool.
And so we have that, but unfortunately, the long delayed Disco season is, Lower Decks. We have Lower Decks, and then we'll
right.
So
and then we have a gulf of time. Yeah.
So that hollow period, maybe I'll force you guys to watch Voyager with me.
Well, I'm up for it.
Well, I actually think there's a couple, like the Scorpion 2-parter of Voyager is really fantastic. But one of the things that Voyager that works with me is that I love Brandon's like I want to make Trek weird thing.
Right.
And so, and like, I don't know. So that's so, and the fact that Brian Fuller came out of Voyager too and went on to do Hannibal, there were some weirdos over at the Voyager.
Right. Right.
So they were willing to turn Janeway into a salamander who made it with her pilot in an episode.
I definitely did not see that.
I didn't see that either.
Well, it's funny if you see Brandon I talked to Brandon about that episode. His exact words were, "I flew too close to the sun on that."
Hey, David, on that
the
note,
reputation that episode has, and it's great. Like when they did when the guy made that homemade animated series version of that episode, I was the one that sent it to Brandon, and I was so stoked to see his immediate reaction. He was like, "He made it better."
Hey, David,
right,
on
guys,
that note, I have to.
Yeah, we gotta go. I do want to talk to you guys about one thing offline before we go, but for the listeners at home, I don't know when we'll be back. Issa and I might do Ahsoka at the end of that season, but he doesn't know it. He hasn't watched Rebels or Clone Wars, so
I'll be the fresh voice of
dude, Ahsoka is basically Rebels season 5. It really is. So what Rebels to Ahsoka is doing is exactly what you want Lower Decks to do. They're taking the cartoon and making it live action. They really
I like watching live action stuff, so I'll
Rebels is great. If you like Star Wars at all, Rebels is great.
I like Star Wars at all, for sure. Hey, real quick, this is totally unscripted, but David, don't you have your new book coming out really soon?
I do. The Last Night to Kill Nazis. This is the worst possible time to promote it at the very end. Yeah. Well, and I'm doing a book tour. So Mysterious Galaxies on September 14th. The 16th in Encinitas at Artifact Books, and in Los Angeles at Dark Delicacies on the 17th.
Oh.
And
wait,
sure,
is
and
this
that's
all
with
of
Cody
August?
Goodfellow. And for sure, I don't know if John Shirley's going to make San Diego, but he's going to make Burbank. So
Wait, is this all in like a week?
it's all in 3 days, 4 days.
Dude, you should promote this stuff a little. Let me know how to show up for this. I don't even know.
I've been promoting it online a ton, but the thing is with events, you can't do it too far in advance, people forget. So you gotta do it closer. So
all right, well, send me a private message and remind me, because I'll come to the ones up here.
Yeah,
I wish I could.
Yeah. Well, Des, you're welcome to come travel with me if you want to.
Yeah, you believe me, I would love to. I would love to. My bank account would love me not to, however.
Well, should be a fun time. Cody and John have
Yeah.
sci-fi action books coming, so we're all celebrating action books because
Yeah.
Cody's is about a heist on a high tech like skyscraper, and John's is about suborbital like military planes. So it's like
Cool.
fighting Russia. So
Nice.
they're all action books.
The Russian enemy is making a comeback. I love it.
Well, whose fault is that?
Yeah,
It's Putin.
exactly.
All right, so folks,
Are we the baddies?
if you made it this far, I knew this would be a doozy. That's why my wife planned to be away from the house, so she wouldn't have to listen to Star Trek talk for 3 hours. Yeah, so offline, I'll talk to you guys about one other thing. But folks, have fun at home, and we'll see you for Lower Decks, and at least some of us. And Des, you did a great job. So
Oh, hey, thanks.
folks,
Thanks for having me.
yeah, if folks want to find you, Dread Media is your podcast.
That's right. Yeah, dreadmedia.com or just Dread Media, wherever you get podcasts.
Yeah, Des does amazing, very in-depth coverage of all kinds of like B horror movies and like lots of great horror stuff. Like I actually, one of the reasons why I don't listen to your podcast all the time anymore is because it makes me have to watch so much more shit.
Fair.
Because I'm like, damn it, Des made that sound good too. No, you talk me out of movies sometimes too.
Yeah, well, I consider that a sacred duty as well at times. Yeah.
I love you and Daryl covering movies though. Like,
Yeah.
I can also tell how much you drank in interviews, like how deep in the night you guys are.
Yeah,
Because,
when we sat down to do a full day of movies, by the time you get to movie number 5, which
right,
is
I
like
can always
like
tell when you're on
like
movie 1 or you're
like
on
the King
movie
Kong,
5.
the King Kong remake is just me being like, God, Naomi Watts is hot.
Well, I can
Horrible.
definitely tell where you guys are usually when I
Yeah.
listen.
Yeah, definitely.
All right, so folks, check out Dread Media. Issa, you don't want people to
Thank
find you.
I'm easy to find on Facebook.
Well, people should listen to
Eh.
your band. Good, clean fun.
Hell yeah.
Classic 90s hardcore. So good, clean fun out of DC. And bye, folks.